Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
"Hello, Emily Johnson," said the older woman. Her neighbor friend Mary Smith said hello. "How are you holding up?" "Hello. What can I say?" "I'm hanging in there." Emily Johnson smiled sadly. "I'm not used to it, unfortunately. First my husband, now my son." Emily Johnson tried to pretend that everything was fine. It was difficult. The recent death of her son had hit her much harder than one might think. The emptiness inside grew daily, crowding out all thoughts and feelings. "You're good. I don't even know how I would have done it myself," Mary Smith shook her head. "Yes, the job helped. After my husband died, the business he left behind had to be rebuilt almost from scratch. Jack, my son, helped me. We built the company together." And now, Emily Johnson felt tears welling up in her eyes. She took a handkerchief out of her pocket and dabbed her eyes. Her son's funeral seemed to have taken the last of her strength. While outwardly benevolent, inwardly the old lady was nearly falling apart. Jack was so young, so handsome. A car accident is a terrible thing," Mary Smith shook her head. "It wasn't the car. It's just that he lost control and plummeted off the bridge into the river. Can you imagine? The body was in such a state that they had to bury it in a closed casket," Emily Johnson sobbed. "Did they do a DNA test? Maybe he wasn't the one driving. Who else would it be? The car is his. The papers in it are in his name." Her mother shook her head without hope. "No, I didn't do the test. It's not like I'm related to him. Took Jack from an orphanage once. I had health problems when I was young. My husband and I couldn't have children of our own, so we decided to adopt. I actually love babies. But right now you can only dream about it so the house won't be empty." Emily Johnson felt her shoulders shake. To remain like this in front of her neighbor was not to be desired. So the widow nodded politely and then headed in the direction of her mansion. The large 3-story building now seemed to her like a cage, filled only with silence and shards of the past. It was unbearable to live here all alone. Therefore, Emily Johnson increasingly preferred to go away on business trips for work. The train is now arriving on track 3. "Move away from the edge of the platform," came a distorted voice from the speaker. Emily Johnson stepped carefully off the step, picking up her light suitcase. "Hi, can you tell me which way to go to the subway here?" A man's voice suddenly sounded. Emily Johnson turned around, seeing an unfamiliar man surrounded by 5 children. "It's right next door. Come out of the train station and take an immediate left," she said in surprise. "Thank you. And that we just came from the village. We don't know our way around at all. My wife Amber went to look for a diagram. I thought I'd ask you," the man smiled. "My name is Adam, by the way. You'll have to excuse us for being so casual. We're just country folk." Adam smiled embarrassedly, cradling the kids in his arms. 3 boys and 2 girls huddled around their father, looking around fearfully. They all looked shabby, as did the father himself. His clothes smelled of smoke for some reason, and were stained with soot in some places. "Shall I walk you out?" Emily Johnson offered serenely. "Oh, we'd be glad to, or we'll get lost. Let's just wait for Amber. Otherwise, we don't even have phones to call each other. We've never traveled by train before. Everyone lived in their own village," the man replied. "Do you use it much?" Adam inquired casually. "I almost always take the trains for work. I like luxury accommodations and leisurely travel. I'm afraid of airplanes." Emily Johnson waved her hands. "Your position must be important," Adam nodded. "My own business," she brushed it aside. "What are you in town for?" "We're in trouble." Adam immediately grew sad. "The house burned down. Nothing left at all. Only 3 of us survived in what we were wearing. So we decided to go to town. There's nothing to live on, of course, but it's even worse in the country. No work, no property." "What about you now? Where are you going to live?" Emily Johnson asked sympathetically. "Hang around for a while and then I'll get a job," Adam said as he continued to cradle his toddlers, 7 or 8 years old. Wary, they looked around, expressing a clear distrust of the world. Emily Johnson's heart clenched. All right, adults, but why should such tiny children wander around in the middle of nowhere and wait for a miracle hungry, cold, without a clear and understandable prospect for tomorrow? No, such a kind-hearted woman simply could not afford. Look, why don't you stay at my place tonight? Emily Johnson said, smiling. Nah, it's kind of awkward. Adam hesitated. We don't even know each other. Why would you welcome strangers into your home? We're not strangers. The woman splashed her hands. I know you. I know your wife's name too. And the kids are Victoria, Olivia, our Artem, Sergei, and Alyosha. Adam introduced the kids one by one. Well, I guess we've met. Emily Johnson smiled. Don't you worry. There's plenty of room for everyone. I have a 3-story house. I live all by myself, so don't be shy with me. I don't know. If you're so sure, we won't be a problem. It's settled. No more talking. We're going to my place. You'll get some rest, eat normally, and get some rest from the road. You guys okay with that? Emily Johnson asked with a smile. The kids only continued to frown, and only Sergei nodded in agreement. There's our mom, Adam said. Hello. Amber, who had approached, said a modest hello. Hello. So, shall we get ready? Let's go visit me. Emily Johnson smiled at her. Artem, Olivia, stop being disruptive, came Amber's voice. It's fine. Let them play. Emily Johnson waved her hand complacently. It had been several weeks since the large family had moved into her mansion, and the empty walls were finally filled with a bustle and noise that the elderly hostess even enjoyed. After all, she was so tired of the lonely life. And now she could play with the children from time to time and even take care of them. I'm sorry to bother you, Amber smiled guiltily. We bother you all the time. It's okay. It's not a burden. In fact, I'm a little glad. It turns out that helping others is quite pleasant. Emily Johnson replied to her companion's smile. Don't worry. Once Adam gets a job, we won't bother you anymore. It's not like we're freeloaders, Amber hastened to assure her. It's okay. Make yourselves at home here. I'm pretty happy with everything. So it's okay if you can't move out right away. No one's rushing you, Amber said quietly. We have some money, so we can kind of pay the rent on the rooms. It's not much, but it's better than nothing. It's uncomfortable sitting on my neck. What kind of nonsense is that? I won't take any money from you. The landlady immediately rejected the offer. I understand that you are in a difficult situation. I don't worry about anything. I'm not physically or financially constrained by you. Somewhere in the adjoining room, there was the sound of children's laughter. It seemed that the little ones were again engaged in some kind of fiddling. Their cheerful energy involuntarily infected everyone around them. For the first time since the day her son left, Emily Johnson felt a little bit alive. This chance encounter with parents of many children had kept her from falling into the abyss of despondency. And for that, it was worth every penny. She never dreamed she'd have a whole family to replace the one she'd lost. So, don't be embarrassed. Live as long as you like. I think I'll be going now. Emily Johnson nodded contentedly. She stepped out onto the porch, breathed in the warm air, and put her face in the sunlight. Life seemed to be getting better, and that feeling of lightness was truly priceless. Hello. How are you? I heard Mary Smith's voice. Hello, Emily Johnson replied good-naturedly. Everything is just fine. I hear you've taken in some guests. Oh yes, I met a family. They're going through some grief, 5 kids. So I thought I'd help out. You didn't take them in right away. At our age, you have to be more careful. You never know, the neighbor said warily. What do you think could happen? Emily Johnson dismissed the question lightly. Oh, these are the times. But you can't be so gullible. I beg your pardon, but are you all right in your head? Mary Smith took a serious tone. You've taken in a bunch of strangers. Is that what you know about them? What should I know about them that they haven't told me? Emily Johnson asked naively. They're good people. They say they've been burned. Do you have any proof? Did you even call the village? Did you check people's databases? Well, you cannot be so naive. Splashed Hands friend, I'm worried about you. They are essentially strangers, and you let them into your home. You handed them the keys. Oh, you watch too many crime shows. You see thieves and crooks everywhere. Emily Johnson joked. Emily Johnson did not want to listen to the arguments of the neighbor. The tranquility of her soul was too fragile to subject it to such serious tests. Life after a long loneliness finally had meaning. It would be unwise to lose this joy because of foolish suspicions. Give it back. It's my candy, came Olivia's crying voice. You've already eaten yours. It's common you have to save them, Vika answered her. Well, children, be quiet. No one is hurting anyone here. Emily Johnson intervened in the conflict. Eat as much as you want. We'll buy more tomorrow. Yay! Olivia shouted happily. The girl ran off to her room, clutching the sweet treasure in her little fist. For a month now, the family of Burners had been living in Emily Johnson's house. Adam went out every day to look for work, but finding a position for a villager with no education was difficult. Honestly, Emily Johnson could have helped in that regard, but she just didn't want the family to move away, leaving her alone again. Everything was fine, except she did notice one oddity. Vika, wait, she stopped the girl who already wanted to follow her sister. I wanted to ask you something. Yes, the little girl was immediately wary. Why are you all about the same age? How did that happen? I don't know, she shrugged. And my mom never said anything about it. No, we don't talk much. All right, run along. Just please don't hurt your little sister. I'm not hurting, it's just that food has to be saved. We don't know when next time we'll be able to eat as well as we did. Vika threw a strange phrase and ran off to her room. Poor things, Emily Johnson sighed pitifully. So little, and already they've suffered. There was something else Emily Johnson preferred not to think about in addition to the oddity with age. It was as if the children disliked their parents. None of them clearly showed it, just squinted occasionally or snapped back at a remark. Okay, none of my business, Emily Johnson reprimanded herself, shaking her head. That's the last thing I need is to go poking around in other people's laundry. Little did kids resent their parents for not having money and a normal existence. Of course, discussing the matter was something she really wanted to do, but Amber and Adam might take offense, and talking about such things with the neighbor after a speech about the suspiciousness of a large family would be unwise. Okay, stuff happens in life. Emily Johnson dismissed her thoughts. After reassuring herself that everything was fine, she headed to her room to get some rest before her paperwork. What kind of mess is this? Emily Johnson said in surprise. She looked around the bedroom perplexed, noting things scattered here and there. Are the kids acting up? Emily Johnson pulled out the drawer of her bedside table, which was also upside down, and sat thoughtfully on the edge of the bed. It looked as if someone was searching the rooms, looking for something. That's an interesting twist, she said thoughtfully. Thinking was kind of bad. About Adam and Amber, she didn't want to think about them. They'd shown nothing but the best of themselves for a month, and they'd never once abused the trust of their elderly benefactor. I'll go do some work, and then I'll see if I can't be bothered with my own doubts. Emily Johnson got out of bed and, trying not to pay attention to the mess, went to the office. Owning her own business required constant supervision, so she'd set up a workspace right next to her bedroom. Should I lock the door? Forgot, Emily Johnson muttered, glancing at the open sash as she stepped inside. She involuntarily began to look around, looking for signs of someone else's intrusion, but it seemed to be business as usual. It's embarrassing, Emily. It's embarrassing to suspect people when you haven't caught anyone by the hand yet. The landlady berated herself for her suspicions toward the lodgers, but opened the safe just in case. Inside, as before, were folders with contracts, financial statements, and a few packages of money. Emily Johnson knew exactly how many bills there should be. After all, she always counted her finances. But she didn't feel like doing it right now. It was as if it would be a betrayal of the people who believed her. But doubt. Wasn't the spare key to the safe looked for in my room? She stretched out thoughtfully. Amber's offer to pay for their stay here and the rare purchases the new guest did make came to mind. According to Adam, he hadn't found a job yet, but the family still had some cash on hand. Emily Johnson always put it down to having some savings. They couldn't have gone to a foreign city without a penny in their pockets. But now, amid all that had happened, it was beginning to seem too strange a coincidence. No, it can't be, she reprimanded herself for the umpteenth time. This was definitely some kind of mistake. Blaming the innkeepers right now without proof was foolish. If Amber and Adam had nothing to do with it, it would hurt them badly and undermine Emily Johnson's own reputation. But if they were, indeed, plotting a robbery, the landlady thought for a moment. She was never a naive fool. Otherwise, she would not have been able to raise from the ruins of almost ruined company of her husband. The question of stealing money from the cabinet was very serious, and it was necessary to prove or forever disprove the involvement of her new friends in this case. Emily Johnson resolutely picked up the receiver of an old-fashioned cordless telephone and dialed the number of a familiar security specialist. "Hello, I'm listening to you," came John Smith's voice almost immediately. "Hello. This is Emily Johnson." "Hello. I recognize you," came the businesslike reply. "Is something wrong?" "Well, it's not like it happened directly. Anyway, can you set up cameras in my office?" "Sure. When do you need to?" "Soon." Amber asked, "Have you called the electricians recently? Is everything okay?" "Concerned?" Adam inquired. "You should have told me. I know my way around wiring. Why waste money? I'd at least help." "It's no big deal. It's just preventative maintenance. The insurance company sometimes sends specialists to make sure I don't start a fire and get a payout from them." Emily Johnson smiled. "And your house is insured?" Adam clarified with unusual interest. Of course, Emily Johnson didn't want to lie to her new acquaintance, but had to come up with a convincing story so that the expert sent by John Smith to install the camera wouldn't arouse suspicion. "Okay, good night then." Adam waved his hand, bidding his hostess farewell. "Good night. I'm leaving again tonight. I'll be away from home for the night. So don't worry, if anything," Emily Johnson replied. As she looked at the man, she noted that he had once again come back with nothing. The jobs were either low-paying or not matching the description in the ad. Maybe she should have put someone on Adam to find out what he was doing all day long. But Emily decided to take that step only after she had hard evidence. "So, let's see what we have going on," she said to herself as she left the house. Getting into her car, she drove away from the mansion and opened her laptop. The screen was displaying images from all the cameras in the study. For several days now, Emily had been repeating her nightly vigils, diligently monitoring what was going on in the house while her mistress was away. Just a couple more days. "If I don't find anything, I don't know how I'll face them," Emily Johnson said. The monitor, as always, broadcast a black and white image. The cameras were filming in night mode, so as not to give away their presence with the lighting. "I think I'm just crazy." Emily shook her head, observing the emptiness of the office for the umpteenth time. It was already the third day, and the mysterious thief still hadn't shown any activity. Perhaps it was time to call it a day. Emily Johnson wanted to go to the hotel where she was staying for the night, but suddenly she noticed some movement on the monitor. That can't be right. The office door swung open. The lights came on for a second. The cameras went out, going back to normal. And then Emily Johnson saw, to her horror, Adam and Amber strutting around the room. "The old lady's been away a lot," Adam said, sitting down defiantly in his desk chair. "Oh well. There's time for a proper turnaround," Amber answered him, leaning over to the safe. The cameras were recording the sound perfectly, and Emily Johnson could hear the conversation in great detail. "It's time to wrap it up. I think we've had enough," Adam said. "Man, this house is so cool. I really don't want to leave. Why don't we pull some kind of scam to get the old lady to write us into the inheritance, and then send her away?" Amber suggested. "You think the relatives will let us? I bet there's a line on that house already." "She doesn't have anyone. Her son died, her husband died a long time ago. No other relatives. I already figured it out, Amber bragged. She pulled her keys out of her pocket, opened the safe with ease, and began counting the bills in stacks from each stack. Emily carefully pulled in a few bills at a time, placing them in a prepared baggie. Man, change, I want to get a proper spread already, Amber said, regretfully returning the wads of money to their place. Emily Johnson pressed her palms to her lips, trying to suppress a sob. Could she have miscalculated so badly? Blindly put her trust in true con artists? The people who had been so loving and caring were going to take her property, cynically and brazenly disposing of her benefactors, without a shred of regret. "What are you guys doing here?" Jessica's voice came over the recording. The girl entered the office sleepily, squinting her eyes against the bright light. "None of your business," Adam immediately barked at her. The little girl flinched but didn't run away, stopping on the threshold of the office. "She's so nice. Can't we at least not rob her house, please?" Jessica said. "None of your business, you fool," Adam barked. "Go to bed or I'll give you a good beating. Don't you dare meddle in our business." "You little shit," Amber hissed, looming menacingly over the girl. "Or else you'll end up back in that dump we pulled you out of." As Emily Johnson listened to them talk, she gasped again. She certainly hadn't expected such treatment of children. And now, looking at all of this, she absolutely realized that she had fallen for the scammers who had simply fooled her by pandering to the guise of multiple child weather beaters. "John, I'm sorry to call so late," Emily Johnson said in a shaky voice as she dialed a familiar number on her cell phone. "That's okay. I'm still awake," the security specialist responded. "John, my situation is complicated," she sobbed. "It's okay. Can you tell me?" Emily Johnson briefly recounted what had happened, interspersing the sad story with her own sobs. The story of the crooks had really broken her heart, and now she didn't know how to deal with the misadventures that had befallen her. "It's okay, Emily Johnson. Don't be afraid of anything," John said cheerfully. "Email those notes to me and drive yourself to safety." "What do you plan to do?" Emily Johnson interjected in a trembling voice. "Call the police, of course. With evidence like this and a practically clean confession, they're sure to go to jail. I don't even worry about it." "What about the kids? What about the children?" "I don't know if they're their legal guardians, but either way the kids are too young." "They'll definitely be sent to an orphanage," Emily Johnson replied. "It's generally a solvable issue, but I don't know if you should mess with it. It's age, after all. It's just that I'm attached to them." "All right, let's deal with the issues as they come up. We'll deal with your adult guests first, then we'll think about the fosters." "Okay." "Thank you," Emily Johnson sobbed and disconnected the phone. Emily leaned back in the driver's seat, feeling her sobs tearing outward. The world had once again dealt her a cruel blow to her very heart. It wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair. What a fool she'd been, believing the first people she met and bringing them into her own home. "So, Emily Johnson, all set," John said, putting his arm around the older woman's shoulders. "Have they been arrested?" she asked in a shaky voice. "Yes. Turns out Amber and Adam are professional con artists. They'd been wanted for a long time, but because they were constantly moving, they'd managed to elude justice. Am I not the first?" The woman interjected in a dropped voice. "Unfortunately, they've been practicing this scheme for a long time, rubbing their way into the confidence of the elderly wealthy. Adam presses pity and then steals from them. A few times they've even managed to take possession of the benefactor's property. But how did they come upon me? They were just waiting for passengers to get off the luxury cars. Rich people tend to be charitable. Some give alms to poor weather beaters, and others offer to help with the settling in. It's not your fault you were too gullible. It's just that these people weren't in need," John Smith said cautiously. "What about the children?" Trying to keep her cool, Emily Johnson inquired. It turned out that the Fosters didn't belong to them at all. She was overcome with shock. Of course, she suspected that the family had difficulties, but it was beyond her to guess what they were. Such things had simply never come into contact with the world of a wealthy woman. And this was the first time she had seen life from such an unsightly side. And where did they get them? Emily Johnson asked with trembling lips. On the street somewhere they took street children, somewhere children who had run away from the orphanage. Somewhere they bought their own offspring from vagrants. So it was easier for Adam and Amber to get into the trust, hiding behind the image of a loving family. Emily Johnson clearly felt her heart prickling. Experiencing such a thing was too much for her advanced age. Tears had been rolling down her cheeks for a long time, bringing with them the pain of betrayal and the longing of injustice. "Don't be so upset," John said sympathetically. "It's only a performance. You were tricked into taking advantage of a good heart. But that's all over now." "That's all true, of course," Emily Johnson shook her head. "But it's the children I want to keep, get custody of them. Everything as it should be. A noble decision. I mean, the children are the least to blame in this whole thing, but they're the ones who have suffered the most. It's not fair," Emily Johnson said. "They were used as a tool and now they've just been abandoned. I can't let them end up in a shelter. All right, I'll help you with custody. But I'll warn you right away, the paperwork isn't easy." "Emily Johnson, we understand, but keep your age in mind," Sarah, the foster care representative, said tertly. "It's not an insult. It's just that if something happens to you, the children will be orphaned again. It would be a huge stressor for them. And with the kind of life the little ones have led before, they deserve a calm, normal place to develop. An orphanage sounds like a perfect fit as such a place to you?" Emily Johnson raised an eyebrow. Getting custody arrangements had proven to be a real challenge. She had used all her connections to make it possible. But the authorities at the orphanage where Jessica, Tom, Olivia, and Sam had been temporarily placed kept stalling. There was no way they were going to go along with a lonely elderly woman, even if she was wealthy. "You can visit them. You can come every day. Take them to your house for the weekend. Become a sponsor for the orphanage to improve their conditions," Sarah said. "I want them to live with me and grow up in a friendly, comfortable environment, not be guests," Emily Johnson insisted. "Understand, if they are only dependent on you, they may end up with nothing," Sarah stated firmly. "I will include them in my will, and even if I am gone, the children will have a good fortune. My trustees will make sure they have everything they need to live. And then a good education and startup capital," Emily Johnson explained. "That's very generous," Sarah had to admit. "If things are as you say, perhaps we can trust you to raise the little ones. But you must remember that children are not pets. Once you have made them trust you, you must not abandon them. Otherwise you risk doing irreparable psychological damage." It seemed Sarah was trying to hint at the hastiness of the decision. It wasn't the first time she had suggested that they should consider whether to adopt or at least reduce the number of children. But Emily Johnson stood firmly on its own, not wanting to separate the attached to each other babies. Even if they were not related by blood, she was sure she could handle it, and despite her age, she could raise all 5 of them. "Believe me, I know what betrayal is, and I would never put these children through something like that," Emily Johnson assured her. "Thank you for not abandoning us," Jessica said, stopping cautiously at the threshold of the workroom. "Is something wrong?" Emily Johnson interjected, lifting her head from her papers. It was already evening in the courtyard. Tired after school and extra lessons with the governess, the little ones were supposed to be resting in their rooms. But Jessica, the most serious of the bunch, continued to stand in the office doorway, eyes modestly downcast. "I thought you were going to put us in an orphanage. Since Amber and Adam wanted to rob you," the girl whispered. "They were bad, but it's still better than the life we had before them." "Come here," Emily Johnson called out. The girl stepped unhesitatingly closer, and then shuddered as she felt a warm embrace on her shoulders. "You are not guilty of anything. And I will take care of you now," Emily Johnson whispered, settling the girl into her lap. Despite her young age, Jessica was already smart beyond her years. It seemed that she had been through a lot of bad things that made the child grow up too fast. The fate of this little girl made Emily Johnson's heart ache, and she made a firm promise to herself that the children would never see poverty, hunger, or mistreatment again. "Thank you," whispered the girl, timidly embracing her benefactress in return for the first time in ages. The idyll was shattered by the sudden ringing of the doorbell. Jessica flinched, and Emily Johnson glanced in surprise at the intercom screen next to her desk. There was a woman shuffling nervously from foot to foot on the doorstep of the manor house. Who could that be? The landlady said in surprise. The stranger on the porch looked quite neat and was dressed in decent clothes. Definitely not a vagrant, but not a caretaker's representative either, each of whom Emily Johnson had managed to get to know personally. "Hello, who are you here to see?" she said, pressing the intercom button. "Head girl, wait," the woman responded, slightly stammering with excitement. "You see, the thing is, I've been told, anyway, I'm Ethan's mom, the boy you adopted just a little while ago." Jessica immediately glanced fearfully at Emily Johnson, clutching her fur as if expecting a punch. "It's okay, baby. Go to your room and don't be afraid of anything. I'll figure it out." Emily Johnson smiled cheerfully at the girl and then, after waiting for her to leave, opened the door lock and headed towards her guest. "Good evening. I apologize for the intrusion," the stranger said in embarrassment upon seeing the lady of the house. "My name is Rachel, and the orphanage where Ethan was recently admitted said that you are now his guardian. I'd like, if possible, to at least see him, make sure my son is okay." "I'm sorry, Rachel, how come?" Emily Johnson perplexedly interjected, eyeing her guest. "I thought my children didn't have parents. Or what?" The little ones became irrelevant to them. "That's an odd coincidence. You only showed up when Ethan found a real home." I checked. "The kids were in orphanages or on the streets. There's not a single mention of you in any of the paperwork. Which begs the question, how did this happen?" "You see, it's a very complicated story," Rachel replied in a shaky voice. "The thing is, I had an affair with a young man. We were kind of from different backgrounds. He's a rich heir to wealthy parents, and I'm a simple girl from the countryside." Rachel stepped from foot to foot. She nervously rubbed the edge of her blouse and nibbled her lower lip. She was clearly uncomfortable in such a rich house. A story from the past was hard to give, forcing her to go through a not-so-pleasant period of her life again. "We started dating my young man. Loved each other, at least I thought we did. He became my first man. Then I found out I was pregnant. The wedding, I take it, didn't take place," Emily Johnson clarified. "No," Rachel replied. "His parents were against it, insisted on an abortion. Offered money, scared me with a lawsuit. But I didn't listen. I gave birth to a boy. I didn't need their fortune. The two of us would have just gone away together to my parents' house. But they," Rachel exclaimed, pressing her back against the front door. Her shoulders shook. Her face was distorted by an inexpressible sadness. "They took away my baby boy, so I couldn't accuse their son of paternity and make me pay child support. And then, you just can't imagine. They didn't want Ethan. They didn't want to acknowledge him and just put him in boarding school like a worthless thing." Rachel sobbed, covering her face with her palms. Looking at her, Emily Johnson realized that the girl was speaking quite sincerely. Her emotions were too strong. It was the kind of thing even the best actor couldn't fake. "The worst thing is that I was not allowed to see him, even in the boarding school," through tears continued Rachel. "I couldn't adopt him. I couldn't find out how my boy was doing. They changed the orphanage to an orphanage, then moved him to another orphanage. They did everything they could to make me lose track of them. I wouldn't have known about you if it wasn't for Sarah, an old classmate of mine. She tried to delay the adoption so I could get here. But I didn't." Emily Johnson walked over to Rachel and cradled her in her arms. A mother's heart had heard all that was needed, and now the mistress of the house believed in the words she had spoken. She could understand the feelings of this unhappy young woman, whose heart had been scarred not only by the long separation from her child, but also by injustice. Now they both stood silently lamenting the unjust fate that separates mothers from their babes. "Will you let me see him?" "Please," whispered Rachel. "Of course," Emily Johnson replied. "You can see him as much as you want. The baby needs a real mother. There's no way you can separate them." Rachel calmed down a little, put her palms down, and looked at Emily Johnson. A secret hope gleamed in her eyes. Will you really let me take my boy? Yes, Emily Johnson replied. Thank you. Rachel rushed to embrace her benefactress, showering Emily Johnson with thanks. Her heart was pounding frantically. For the first time in a long time, she believed she could finally be together with her son. The motherly soul, exhausted by the separation, exulted. Only there is one condition. Emily Johnson finished her thought softly but inevitably. What condition? Confused by the unexpected phrase, Rachel asked. You'll have to live in my house because I can't give Ethan up. Just like that. I took responsibility for him. Vowed and promised your classmate Sarah, by the way, too, that I would take care of him. Trust me, he'll be fine with us. Rachel's newly found happiness, which was about to be in her hands, was slipping away again, for she was dependent on the whims of others. Once again, she had to adjust herself to the conditions. All these experiences were so vividly reflected on her face that Emily Johnson was even embarrassed. You didn't seem to understand what I was trying to say. I just want all of you to be happy, and for that, I'm willing to provide the facilities. Is that where you work? Emily Johnson asked. I grow vegetables in the greenhouse, then I sell them. I get paid a lot, enough, Rachel said confidently. And I'll pay more. I don't need handouts, Rachel replied sharply. If you think I think you're poor, you've misunderstood again. Emily Johnson smiled. I'm not trying to humiliate you. I want to hire you for a job. By who? Rachel asked in surprise. As a maid. I really need help in this big house. There were the children again. It's hard to keep up with them, smiled Emily Johnson. You'll be doing the usual chores around the house, helping me and taking care of your son. Take care of the other 4 little ones at the same time. And you won't mind, even if total freedom. You can do whatever you want. We'll agree on weekends and long hours. No one will keep you here like a cage. You can visit your parents, see your family. The usual. Rachel froze, contemplating the generous offer. Emily Johnson was offering a real chance at a better life, and besides, she really wanted to see her son. Only I have a fiancé out there in the village. We met strangely. I saved his life, you could say. He and I became close, and now we've decided to live together. No problem. You'll move in, get used to it, and then you'll bring him along. We'll find him a job in his specialty. I'll take care of it, nodded Emily Johnson confidently. What? The good fairy godmother? Smiled Rachel timidly. Well, what's the point of making all this money if it can't be used to help the truly needy? You can't take it with you to the next world anyway, smiled Emily back at her. Emily Johnson, can I clean up your place? Said Rachel, knocking on the office door. Yes, daughter. Come on in, echoed the lady of the house. Several weeks had passed since their arrangement. Rachel had indeed moved into the mansion officially, but contracted to work as a maid. Emily had observed all the formalities so that the woman could feel completely safe. Thank you for helping out, the office hostess said. Tired, I suppose. You're always at work. Business is a tricky thing. It's hard to keep up with the dust, Rachel retorted. She fluttered effortlessly over the shelves piled with documents, deftly wielding a special brush. Rachel was happy with her life, quietly humming a song under her nose, tidying up her office. Emily Johnson looked at her with a smile, happy that she was actually able to make someone happy. Oh, where did you get this? And why is it in a black frame? Said Rachel suddenly and superstitiously crossed herself. What? Interjected Emily Johnson in surprise. What frightened you? Isn't it? Where does she come from? Said Rachel disconsolately, pointing to the photograph. Emily Johnson looked up in surprise at the black frame on her desk. The image had a black ribbon crossing the right-hand corner. Smiling carefree was a young man looking somewhere in the distance with clear eyes. That's my son Daniel, Emily Johnson replied. Unfortunately, he's dead. Oh, no, he didn't. He's not dead, Rachel exhaled. That's my fiancé's. Only he never remembered his name, so he chose a new name, Michael. Wait. This is some kind of joke. What does this have to do with your fiancé? Frowned Emily Johnson. The past and history had taught the lady of the house a lot. She no longer took people at their word so easily, making sure to verify every statement they made. Biography of Rachel herself John thoroughly studied. But they somehow forgot about the fiancé, deciding to postpone it until better times. "Look, if this is some kind of hoax," Emily Johnson began sternly. "No, believe me," Rachel exhaled fearfully. "I met him a while ago, you might say, picked him up in the bushes, found him with his head bashed in, all bloody. Here in town, by the way. I came here on business, and I saw him lying there, and everyone was passing by. I felt kind of bad about it. I gave him first aid." "Why didn't you take him to the hospital?" Emily Johnson asked. "Because he had no ID, no phone, no money. Nothing. All beat up and red. I figured they wouldn't treat a homeless guy in the hospital anyway, even if they turned him into the police. It's just a lot of trouble." "And how did he end up in your village?" "I brought him to his senses a little, and it turned out that Daniel, didn't remember anything. He still doesn't know what happened to him before the accident. Anyway, I got him back to his senses. I don't know where to take him, so I thought about it, and I took him back to my place. I figured he'd figure it out on his own when he got better. But in the end, he decided to stay in the village to live with us. He proposed." "How did he get well without doctors in the middle of nowhere?" Emily Johnson asked in a trembling voice. "I have a neighbor witch doctor with all sorts of herbs to cure any ailment. I've asked her to help, and we've been nursing together. Daniel only had a concussion. He lost his memory from the impact. But there's still no cure for that, not even the most expensive doctors. I don't believe it. I guess my boy's still alive." Emily Johnson felt her lips begin to tremble, barely imagining that her own son needed help while she quietly buried someone instead of Daniel. She felt a monstrous sense of shame. Her chest was crushing, her heart beginning to prick again with invisible needles. "Didn't you even try to find out anything about his past?" Emily Johnson interjected deafeningly. "I'm sorry, but no. Honestly, there wasn't much to go on. Living together seemed so great. I felt truly loved for the first time, and I was terribly afraid I'd lose him if I started digging into the whole thing. I think Daniel felt the same way. But it's not his fault. It's just a coincidence. It just happened that way. You should be glad he's alive, right? Right?" "Of course I am," Emily Johnson exhaled. It really did seem something incredible that the son she'd had time to mourn could come back into her life again, albeit without memory, albeit with another man's name, but alive, healthy, and happy in the love of a good woman. "I'm sorry, but I'll only believe that when I see it with my own eyes." Emily Johnson shook her head. "It's not about you. It's just that I've had so many disappointments in my life that another shock might just be too much for me to handle." "Of course we can go right now," Rachel nodded understandingly. "Daniel is really looking forward to me coming back, or him being able to go away with me. He's worried, wondering if you're hurting me." "Such an abuser of me." Emily Johnson smiled, almost like a con man in the house. "Well, you've probably heard about Adam and Amber. Now, here's a house full of kids. You guys are just really good. And a good heart is not a flaw. Yeah, I wonder how I still managed to run a business. But that's okay. When Daniel comes back, he'll take over again. He hasn't died yet. He hasn't disappeared. He's helped me with everything. It's been so hard without him. But don't worry, things will get better now. He'll be home to you soon." Jennifer hugged Emily Johnson. Emily sincerely empathized with the older woman who had to go through such a terrible grief as the loss of her son. Who but she could understand these feelings? But besides female solidarity in the heart of Rachel hid something else. Fear. Just the fear of a man who didn't want to lose his happiness. What if, when he comes home, he remembers everything? And stop being the man I loved, the man who loved me, Rachel thought. Emily felt a tear protruding from the corner of her eye. But instead of allowing herself to doubt, she hugged Emily Johnson even tighter. No, Rachel just couldn't allow herself to have selfish fears and hope that Daniel would remain only her husband. Not this time, not with the man who had treated her so kindly. "Here we are, my village," Rachel said as their car pulled up to the main street. "So close, not far from town at all. He's been right next to me the whole time. I didn't even feel it." Emily Johnson shook her head contritely. I don't feel bad about it. It's not about you. It's just the way things are, Rachel tried to cheer her up. It was hard, because she was starting to get worried herself. And the closer they got to the house, the stronger the doubts became. Here we are, she said in a shaky voice, noticing that Daniel was already meeting them at the gate. Son. Emily Johnson sobbed as she ran out of the car. She started to run towards him, but immediately stopped when she saw the wary expression on her son's face. Hi, it's us, Rachel said cautiously, also leaving the interior of the SUV. Hello, the boy frowned, examining Emily Johnson, and you must be. Before he could finish, Daniel grabbed his head, feeling red-hot needles pierce his temples. A brief flash. Vague images of the past flashed before his eyes. Are you okay? Rachel came running up immediately. Son, hang in there. Emily Johnson joined her. I think I remember, Daniel moaned with difficulty. The onset of pain began to recede, and with it the shroud of oblivion. The memory of the blow had not fully returned. He looked at the world with new eyes and shifted from foot to foot. Mother. Hi, sorry I've been missing, Daniel said slowly and smiled. Sonny. Emily Johnson walked over to her son and hugged him tightly. Everything fell into place now, and the longing that had been tormenting her soul was finally gone. What happened to you? Emily Johnson whispered, cradling her son in her arms. A stupid coincidence, Daniel said. Some fool stole my car. Broke into the cabin while I was at a stoplight, hit me over the head, and threw me out. I don't know how I got to the bushes. My documents, money, phone, everything was left in the cabin. Then the guy drove off, but apparently he lost control and fell off the bridge. I heard the news about the accident and the death of a famous businessman on the radio, but I didn't know it was about me. It turns out that a criminal died instead of me. There was nothing to identify, so no one noticed the switch. Yeah, but it's okay now. I'm back. Daniel smiled cheerfully at his mother, putting his arm around her shoulders. Looking at them, Rachel took a step back, feeling completely unnecessary. Only I didn't come back alone, Daniel said confidently. He gently released himself from his mother's embrace, walked over to Rachel and took her hand. Here we are, you've already met. But let me make it official. My fiancée Rachel. We love each other. I owe her my life, which I now want to share with her. My good man. I'm only too glad. Rachel furtively cried, but now out of joy. They were all together now, and the fears that had plagued her all the way home were dispelled like smoke. Jessica, call the boys in for dinner. I've already got everything ready, Rachel said, stroking her chief assistant on the head. Okay, Aunt Rachel, the girl stammered, embarrassed. Noticing this, Rachel caught her hand, sat down across from Jessica, and looked into her eyes. It's okay, you can call me Mommy because I love you all like family, she said and hugged the little girl. Thank you for being you, Ma. The little girl sniffled contentedly as she hugged the woman back. But that's it. Go ahead and call everyone to eat. Since Daniel's return home, they had continued to live all together. But now as a big, complete family. Rachel still helped Emily Johnson around the house the same way, but now as Daniel's sister-in-law and legal wife. But still, they took home a helper as well. Jessica, Tom, Olivia, Sam, and Ethan were loved as their own children. All 5 little ones settled in perfectly in the big house, filling its empty walls with boisterous fun and sincere happiness. You're such a good girl, Daniel said, walking into the kitchen to his wife. Love you. For Ashley, meeting Jason was a certain salvation. A dark, empty hole had been growing in her soul until that moment. The girl from a wealthy family had never known rejection. A mother, a former Miss Universe, cared only about not losing the attention of men, and she, like a perpetual motion machine, made her run to fitness gyms, fashion salons, and beauticians. But she had little interest in her daughter. The father was much older than the mother, calm, attentive, and so dear, but all the time was at work. He paid attention, but it was not enough, and sometimes it even seemed like he was hiding from some of life's problems at work. Ashley always dressed better and had the best clothes. Teachers were a little wary of her. For this, she was disliked by her classmates. At university, studying became a salvation. and she liked everything around her. New friends and girlfriends appeared. First love, which was bitter and destructive. And she fell in love with the most attractive, handsome man. He was so good that next to this guy, her brain just seemed to shut off, and she realized that he was from a very rich, powerful family. He loved no one but himself, and he treated all of his ex-girlfriends with condescension and arrogance. He made fun of behind their backs. It was at that moment, when she didn't hear him discussing his ex-girlfriend, calling her obscene words, that she should have stopped and realized that she would become the next one. But she couldn't resist the animal passion. Ashley had always been noted for her intelligence and cleverness. Looking at her mother, who had only brands in her head, she tried to become completely different. She studied on her own. Graduated from high school with honors, but without a medal. At university, she immersed herself in her studies. She wanted to break stereotypes, to be not only beautiful, but also smart. The first beauty of the university, she was noticed by that handsome man and made another tick. If Ashley loved him with all her heart and soul, opened her welcoming arms for him, gave her purity and innocence, then for him she became the next check mark. As soon as he played with her, he just stopped communicating. I tried to meet, to call, but he did not respond. One day I saw him outside the university from the window. He was in an embrace with his classmate. It all made sense. Her subconscious was screaming to leave and not make a scene to preserve her dignity. But her emotions overwhelmed her. She approached, asked. Faced with an overwhelming amount of unpleasant words and ridicule, her heart bled, her soul emptied. After that, there was an emptiness. I couldn't concentrate on my studies. I couldn't seem to breathe. One day, walking in the park, in a state of complete apathy and detachment from reality, she sat on a bench, and there were trees all around, tranquility, the smell of pine trees. There was emptiness in her soul. There was pain in her heart. Even the fact that there was no one to tell, she didn't want to give her friends a reason to gossip. You couldn't tell your father. And her mother? She didn't want to say anything. She kept it all to herself. In her heart, in her soul. She seemed to be crumbling from the inside out. She hadn't slept much lately. Nothing interested her. She wanted to forget everything and start over, but she couldn't. "You look very sad," she heard suddenly. She almost jumped on the bench. She turned and saw a good-looking man of about 25, staring at her with an easy and open smile. For some reason, his appearance inspired confidence. Although Ashley had always been feisty, this time she decided to just ignore it, turning away without answering anything. I wanted to cry. "Don't be sad. You're so beautiful. You'll be fine," he said in a very soft, gentle, and confident voice. When she heard that, she calmed down. He turned away immediately, seeing that she didn't want to talk to him. Jason sighed sadly. He never met a girl like this before. But when he saw her on the bench in the park, he couldn't pass her by. And so delicate, refined, exquisite, but with sad, empty eyes. He knew that look, a look of hopelessness and indifference. Then what was her problem? Beautifully dressed, obviously from a wealthy family, so everything can be changed. Why the incredible sadness? He wanted something to help. And what he'd do. After all, sometimes a few nice friendly words can help a person to return to the true path and overcome internal problems. It is with the help of conversation that psychologists save people. Yeah, I'm not having much fun, but that doesn't concern you. Mind your own business. And I wanted to say something to put him in his place. Ashley looked at him with a demeaning, haughty, cold stare. "Yeah, that's right. No offense. Just wanted to help." He smiled in a very pleasant and friendly way. Ashley saw a rather handsome, athletic guy in front of her, probably looking for another victim, just like her ex. All men are the same. An unbearable ache reappeared in her soul. How could she hate them all? And I don't meet on the street, so don't try. It's not going to work, Ashley said with a little hatred in her voice and turned away. "Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to do something to help." He stood up, picked up the cane that was beside him, and walked slowly, leaning on it. Ashley looked up at him, embarrassed. It was embarrassing. This guy, despite the fact that he was an invalid himself, tried to support her. She stood up and caught up with him. "Oh, I'm sorry. Let's take a walk together," she smiled, and he smiled back at her. From that moment on, they met almost daily. At first, a strong friendship developed between them, trust in each other, mutual support. Jason was raised in an orphanage, was disabled, received an apartment from the state, to which Ashley came quite often, helped him clean, do laundry, buy groceries. Despite his disability, he worked online all the time, taking on any even difficult jobs. "I'm doing my best, Ashley. I still have that balcony to fix. See? I'm almost done with the repairs, just a little bit more. If I could get married, they laughed. But Ashley really admired him. He was so strong. He worked out on the bar at home every day and had such an attractive, handsome, pumped-up body. From their friendship, it had been a real lifesaver for her. Even the anger, the hatred she felt for her ex just went away. It was like she was cleansed of all the negativity. She became free. She realized that when you overcome such moments, you become stronger and wiser. And if what happened to her hadn't happened, maybe she never would have met Jason. And he had become so close to her, such a dear, close friend, a best friend, someone she could tell everything to. It's really cozy here. When I come to you, I feel like I'm finally home, where I'm welcome, where it's warm. She rolled her eyes dreamily. I'm glad. He looked at her with sadness and boundless love. He was philosophical about life. He understood that it was difficult for the poor to get through. He knew that physical limitations imposed their imprint on life. But despite this, he aspired and dreamed. I knew that anything was possible if you wanted it bad enough. But as soon as he saw Ashley on the bench, he immediately knew she was perfect. His heart pounded harder. But there was no chance. And even now that they were best friends, he realized he couldn't give her anything good. But she came from a rich family, a girl who had everything one could dream of. And what was he? It's nothing. Just a small detail in the workings of the capitalist machine. His life, his destiny, is a game of cards. And if you're lucky, you'll be happy. If you're unlucky, there's nothing you can do to build your world. So what are you thinking? Ashley was looking at him very carefully. I guess I'm thinking that I love you, but I can't give you anything with my love. Only care. He decided to tell the truth for some reason. Ashley raised her eyebrows in surprise, but in truth she'd known for a long time that Jason loved her. She felt something for him, too, but there was a limiter inside that warned her not to make any hasty decisions. She'd cleverly reduced the conversation to a friendly love affair, but she realized that it was about something more sublime. She had not yet fully realized her feelings, but she felt incredibly comfortable with him. She could confide all her secrets. She consulted him, and often stayed with him. But most importantly, he had never, until that day, hinted at bed or any personal relationship. Everything was somehow in itself sincere, pure, and incredibly open. And I guess that's what true love is. There was no crazy passion, which was replaced by pain and disappointment. It was stability, openness, complete trust. Before she left for home, Ashley looked at him one more time. Amazing, so gentle and beautiful, with crazy red hair like a carrot, mustache and glasses and green eyes, kind and bottomless, and so smiling, so unnatural in these modern times. If he'd born a woman, he'd be worth nothing with such looks. But he was born inexplicably, where inexplicably by whom he was brought up by the state. He was immersed in a world of temptation, where he could only exist, and incredibly strong, but having a disability, something with his leg, having hope of recovery. Since an expensive surgery could make him whole, but having no real possibility, the guy was not discouraged, struggled and lived. Created his paradise hut in the hope that someday he would bring his beloved here. Courageous, despite the fact that most of his time was spent at the computer, doing something, learning programming. He started every morning with exercise. There was no passion between them, but there was something stronger. Ashley decided to set the table at his place on her birthday and spend the holiday for the first time with someone who was truly family to her. And every year until her 4th year, she had gone home on this day. It's going to be okay, he said. And the girl absolutely understood what he was thinking. Their future would be difficult. It would be hard to give up everything she had previously considered basic needs. But branded clothes, expensive cosmetics, various jewelry, this is not happiness, not life. She will never be like her mother. Alex Adamson's indifferent, soulless father. A respected businessman who was rarely at home and saw no emotion from his wife. The mother was indifferent to anything that didn't have a brand or label on it. The father was nothing but a huge wallet. This, however, did not make the man suffer at all. There was like an unspoken agreement between them, whereby he was rich and Ashley was beautiful. At any events, they transformed into a couple in love, played masterfully, and at home just scattered into different rooms. No scandals, no emotions. A family reunion even sounds awful. Think back on it all. Ashley wrinkled her nose. Maybe not going, but she missed her dad a lot. I have a great dad. Ashley looked at Jason. He'll be sure to introduce you, he smiled. Sure, he said, I'll miss you, so call and write more often. Deal. Ashley couldn't sleep for a long time. She kind of wanted to go home. She really missed her dad. She hadn't seen him much before, but he had always been a true friend to her. So she realized that he would understand and say, "Press forward." And now she had a loved one who was even closer than her dad. So how would her father feel about her chosen one? Never talk to him about this future, about her marriage. But most likely he will not be happy about a son-in-law with no family and tribe, no money. Her father was her friend, but he was a hard, harsh, and cruel man. So it was hard to imagine his cruel man. He needed to be prepared for it. Ashley didn't want to leave Jason. She needed to be there for him. And some inner feeling in her gut told her that he was always on the verge of fighting for life and wanting to die. That even though outwardly he was incredibly positive, strong, and determined, Ashley knew that wasn't always the case. At night, often stroking his arms, marred with scars, small scars, and some were very old, others more recent. How many times had this man, who had no goals, no family, and knew no love, picked up a blade, lay down in a hot bath, and slashed the past, trying to rid himself of the feeling of being unwanted and reconnect with the universe? Why did this man feel like a stranger in life? A lot of things became clear to her after seeing those scars. There was no point in his life to make it up on his own, to continue his path and to nip himself, to make repairs to the apartment, to master programming, to finish the repair. That is it okay to leave him for a whole month? Yes, you can. He loves, he will wait. Everything will be fine. Everything will be exactly as it should be. He's responsible not only for his own life, but for hers. And so he's not likely to do anything stupid. In the morning, Jason just walked her out, trying not to think about being alone again. So when you left him, his mother just brought him to the orphanage and then had her parental rights terminated. He said he tried to find her, searching through every thread he could find, but he couldn't find her. He was about 7 or 8 years old when his mother brought him in and gave him away herself. So I remember her crazy red hair, her green fox eyes, the huge scar on her left cheek. Jason continued, eyes full of grief and hopelessness. She told him then that she loved him, but she couldn't be a good mother girl, and said she was the reason he was now disabled, and because of her, he had no chance for a future. Maybe life will be gracious and you can accomplish a lot. Maybe someone will take you in and you'll have a future, but not with me, she was saying. So large tears flowed from his mother Alice's eyes as he saw that picture again now. It's a beautiful, eye-catching, but tired and unhappy mommy. I'll work, we'll get through this. I'll always be there for you, she said. He didn't understand much at the time, but he knew for sure that he wanted to be by her side. He loved his mother with all his heart. Son, remember me, she said, wiped off from her neck, a very thin chain with a small pendant that looked like a lady daisy, 8-petaled. Don't give it to anyone. It's a picture of you and me. It was a gift from your grandmother, and I've done so many stupid things. I don't belong on this earth. I love you. Remember that always. Always have and always will. Mommy, he snuggled up to her with his whole body, smelled the warm scent of steamed milk and cheap perfume with a hint of pine scent. It was a scent he could sort of smell now. Mommy, all these thoughts made him indescribably sad. Honey, I'll be right back, she said. Ashley didn't love her chosen one. She wanted to take him with her, but she knew it was premature. She called more often she bid, he said. He hugged her again, as he had as a child, breathing in her scent. The scent of the woman he loved. The smell was incredibly delicate and pleasant, delightful. He could smell the delicate notes of lilac. So it seemed that the scent of the woman he loved had completely displaced the scent of his beloved mother from his memory. Arriving home, Ashley immediately met her mother. Oh my God, my darling. Her mother rushed over to hug and kiss her. You've grown up in these 6 months. The pretty girl began to look at Ashley. Mommy didn't miss her. She snuggled up to her, but felt a certain detachment. Honey, do you remember when I bought you that dress? She adjusted her yellow, impossibly gorgeous outfit. Tell me how you, Olivia, looking at your daughter, saw your little, mere replica. She seems nice, but she's gray. We should buy her a good groom. Like she bought any toy she wanted. It's okay, Mom, the session's over. Everything's fine. My daughter put the coffee on the bar. Do you want coffee? It's not healthy. I only drink fresh juice. But she gave her a disdainful look. Don't you ever go to the hairdresser? It always amazed Ashley that her mother somehow didn't care about her emotions, her spirituality. The only thing Olivia cared about was appearance and beauty. And now her own daughter, who hadn't been around for more than 6 months, whose eyes were shining with mad love, was getting attention only in the matter of her hair. It even became kind of unpleasant. Of course it's important. A woman must always remain a woman, beautiful, well-groomed, gorgeous, so otherwise men will not love. I looked proudly at Matsit, reflection in the huge refrigerator. Does your father love you? Asked the daughter with a challenge. Perhaps he doesn't love me, but he appreciates and respects me, the mother said with a little sadness in her voice. Love, my dear, is not the most important thing in a relationship. Have you ever been in love? But you really wondered, mother is so cold. Has she ever had love? He did. She sat down at the table. Let's have some coffee. She got sad. Doubt you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. She felt her mother's pain and immediately felt sorry for her. You loved your father with all my heart, Alex Sergei. He was so attentive and gentle. He wooed you so beautifully. I loved him. I was just like you. Naive, pure, not without the fact that you wouldn't date a poor man. But it wasn't just money. He wasn't so rich then, moderately wealthy. Ashley set a nice, small sugar cup on the table. No, thank you. She tried to make the atmosphere more pleasant, and it was sugar. The girl put her cup on the table and began to stir. Your father was so well looked after. I fell in love with him. And he never loved me. He had the only love of his life, some hippie. He still has her picture, my mother sighed sadly again. I found out when I was pregnant with you, and I thought, it's no big deal. I'll be able to break him. She'll love me. She was smart. You won't believe it. I learned to be an actress, never cross him. And he pretended to love me, but then he started to drift away. Mom, you cannot tell me if you do not want to. Daughter did not want to rake up the past. No, I'll tell you. He stopped coming to my bedroom, and at night he sat and studied until morning. I came in once, and he was asleep on the desk where her pictures were. We haven't lived as husband and wife for a while, and that's the only joy, shopping and beauty, sasti, popping and beauty and all that. Just like that, it all became obvious to Ashley. We'd really just become indifferent thing, and it was all Dad's fault. It was horrible to imagine that Mom loved him sincerely and honestly, as she loved no one. For the first time, her daughter saw her with tears in her eyes, sincere tears. Father, but he loved but another. How terrible it is to live and know that your favorite person does not reciprocate you. Or doesn't love you, doesn't appreciate you, just uses you as a social element. It brought Jason to mind. Honey, how much did she miss him? But why don't you leave your father? You're so beautiful. You'll find love. She truly felt sorry for her mother. So you may not believe me, but I still love him. I don't mean to look indifferent, but I do. I still have hope in my heart. Mommy, calm down. Her daughter hugged her, talked to him. No, and don't tell him anything. Why didn't Ashley always think that all family problems were because people couldn't be honest with each other? It doesn't make sense. She's long since made her peace with it, and it's unlikely that anything will change. Then was open and frank for the first time in the last 20 years. All this time she'd been playing a role as a careless person, fascinated only by appearances. It was once a game, but in time it became routine. Maybe, but I think it's still worth talking about. Ashley said what she thought. She knew that openness and honesty could be the answer to anything. She could see that her mother truly loved her father, so she thought that attitude could be reanimated. Dan was greatly distressed by the memories, so Ashley did not talk about the difficulties she had with her loved one. Ashley wanted to start living with Jason, but she realized that it was important to talk to her father about the relationship. And she needed to get his blessing, and doing that wasn't going to be as easy as it seemed. And her father seemed to always be on her side. But the truth was, if she told him about Jason being disabled and from an orphanage, there was a good chance her father wouldn't accept her choice. And that wasn't even what scared her. She realized that she would be able to finish her studies. And then she would have studies, and then she would work full-time and cope with any difficulties. But she wasn't counting on her father's money. But she was afraid that he'd start pushing her around and maybe bring Jason back. I actually wanted to make him happy, and in no way wanted to be a source of trouble for him. Dad came home from work in the evening. My princess, how happy am I to see you? And the emotional connection with his daughter was very great. No one in his life he loved as much as he loved her. So worried that the little girl's future would be cloudless, without problems. That's why he worked and tried, put everything aside for her sake. Daddy, she threw herself around his neck and sank into a soft but confident embrace. How good of you to come. Why didn't you say it was today? I would have met you yesterday. He shifted his eyebrows theatrically and made a stern look. I wanted to surprise you. His daughter looked at him with eyes full of delight. Daddy always knew how to look gorgeous. Ashley realized now that he must have had a million girls running after him, and he didn't like his mother. I wonder what was the one he loved, the one who had conquered his mind for years. Well, maybe Mom is wrong, and he just keeps some resentment on his soul. So they have no real family, but just a visual deception. Surprised Mom, he said with a certain monotony. Yeah, she and I already had coffee. What did you look like? Is he gorgeous? But the eyes are sad. Ashley had always been able by some subconscious, inexplicable instinct to see his troubles. Right now the visibility was without unrest, but the unrest was inside him. Yeah, some difficulties at work, but that's all minor stuff, as usual. How are your studies? In peaceful conversations they met the evening. Then the family sat down to dinner. Everything was as it always was, perfect, as if her parents had rehearsed dinner or breakfast in the evenings. No bickering, no complaints. Artificial smiles, honey, just like in the best movies. And if an outsider got here, at this ordinary dinner table, they would probably think of the perfect family in front of them. And Ashley was the only one who knew it was a game. Now she found out that her mother was not a soulless doll, but a normal and adequate woman who would put on a mask because of her inner pain and disappointment in love. For several days, Ashley did not dare to talk to her father. The situation irritated her, and there was no doubt in her mind that she loved Jason and wanted to be with him. On the evenings, they texted for hours about absolutely nothing when she tried to be supportive of the guy, as she was afraid that loneliness might play tricks on him again. Honey, I want to talk to my dad about us. But I don't dare, she tried to make her voice carefree, as if, by the way, that's okay. We'll talk some other time. Jason was somehow completely unaware of her doubts and anxiety, and I was thinking of moving in with you starting next semester. Is that okay with you? When they talked to him about it more than once. And while last time she told herself she needed to think about it, today Ashley was sure she wanted to move in with Jason, and as soon as possible. Sure, move in. His voice trailed off. The boy adored Ashley. She was the center of the universe and the center of his life. He wanted to live for her, to create, to build, to create. He wanted to do something beyond what he could do, just to live and breathe the air she breathed. For the first time in his life, Jason felt happy again. Every time he looked at himself in the mirror, he thought about how his mother had abandoned him because of his looks and disability, so unattractive, unreliable, because of his leg and disobedience, capable. He tormented himself with many doubts and torments. And when Ashley came into his life, everything became completely different. Jason stopped thinking about his mother, stopped thinking about the past. He opened the door to the present and the future. Every night the girl called him, telling him how her day was, and he spent all day working on an old chair in the garage. Ashley had once expressed an enthusiasm for antiques. Jason remembered that he had an old chair in his garage that could be restored. The old thing was slowly being transformed. There was a lot of work to do, but in a month his sweetheart would arrive, and it would be the best gift ever. Time passed more quickly, but Jason still had anxious thoughts. He imagined that Ashley wouldn't tell her father, that she wouldn't let her come here, wouldn't let her see him. It was a possibility. And then what would happen? What would he have to live for? No, he'll be happy. He'll have a big family. He'll be strong forever. That's what Ashley had taught him. And the girl was getting ready to take the first step in the conversation. The father stayed home over the weekend. Her mother had left for another procedure, and Ashley and her dad decided to have dinner together. Their everything is always traditionally beautiful. Mary Johnson, their housekeeper and housekeeper, set everything up. To Mary, you may be dismissed. Get some rest, I'll take care of Daddy. Ashley smiled at her favorite housekeeper, who had always been like a grandmother to Quamper. Okay, dear, she asked her host again. Alex Adamson, can I go now? Well, of course. If the daughter wants to take care of her father, so be it. He smiled, then bon appetit. So Mary Johnson dutifully checked everything on the table and left. Meanwhile, Ashley and his father were enjoying the stew, which was delicious and flavorful. As soon as the housekeeper left, Ashley decided to start the conversation. Dad, tell me, have you ever really loved someone? She tried to speak nonchalantly to make her block sound pleasant. A shadow of inner disappointment ran across his face. A sadness appeared in his eyes. You don't have to say anything if you want to. Ashley hoped that he, like her mother, would be frank with her. What was the point of this conversation? He looked at her carefully and shrewdly. I'm in love, she paused tragically. Good. And who is the lucky man? Father said with surprise. His little princess had grown up and become an adult. The father looked at her carefully and penetratingly, all grown up. He will have to part with her. She will live in another house. Well, I'll introduce you, of course. First I faced betrayal, and he supported me, became my best friend. then my favorite person. I can't imagine living without him. Jason's a wonderful man, Ashley said at length, describing everything in the best colors and tones. But most importantly, she left out the information about her lover's disability and lack of a steady job. Her father looked at her too harshly and strictly, but her words touched the man's soul. He remembered his only love, a beautiful American woman with red hair, bright eyes, and gentle hands. "Can you hear me?" Ashley noticed that the man's thoughts were somewhere far away. He'd remembered his life. "Can you tell me so romantically that it brought back memories of my love?" He lowered his eyes, tears seeming to well up in them. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Ashley knew the answer, but she wanted to hear the story from him. "And your mom is someone I respect a lot. She's perfect, but I love someone else so much." He decided to answer his daughter with honesty on honesty. "And who?" The girl tried to make an interested look. "As soon as I started doing business, I met her. Very beautiful, but attracted in her another thing. But she was lively, so free in everything. We started seeing each other. I found out she had a kid, but it didn't scare me. Everything was so cool and romantic, and she was special. But as soon as I asked her to move in with me, she ran away. I looked for her afterward. And just like that, I got a bottle. You want some good wine?" "Yeah." Ashley didn't want wine. She wanted to talk, make her father soften up. Then maybe it would be okay to talk about everything. He heard a lot about her, but no facts, she said with a heavy sigh. "Father, you never saw each other again?" "No, I met your mom a year later. Got married, but it's hard to forget Ashley. Life was kind of colorful, different. When she left, there was an emptiness. Everything faded." He took a gulp of wine. "I see my mother was right about my father torturing her instead of loving her," Ashley thought. "And you know when colors came back into my life?" He looked questioningly at his daughter. "When you were born, you were my salvation in life, became bright again. So that's the way Mom and I live our lives. Everything is good with us. You have opportunities now. Don't you want to find your love?" It was really incomprehensible to her daughter why her parents were not divorcing, but torturing each other. "No, not anymore. I have a family," the father said confidently. "But a family is not a sentence. Why are you tormenting Mom?" She looked at him with eyes full of hatred. "Yes, your mother is well off. She never thinks about anything but money. Though I think she once loved me," my father almost shouted. "Loved and loves." Ashley jumped up. "She's become like that because of you, the one who loved you so much." "Dedicated poems to me." He drank the wine again in a gulp. "What makes you think Mom doesn't love you?" Ashley toned it down a little. "I don't. It's just the way it seemed to me. Mom told me herself that she did and does, and knew you loved someone else and suffered." Ashley stammered, for she had promised her mother not to tell. Her voice trembled. Her father stared very intently. "Interesting. You surprised me. I thought she was indifferent." After this conversation, Father remembered the past. That love with whom there was no equal that made him unhappy. She didn't conquer him with her beauty, but with something else. She wrote him poems that told of true love, so she was a free bird. She didn't want to depend on him. He lied to his daughter without telling the truth, and they lived together. She had a baby boy Alex wanted to adopt. He was willing to work around the clock for her, and she needed attention. She often went off without telling him where she was going, leaving the baby unattended. He'd freak out, scream, and she'd sit and watch him. The first time they were madly passionate. They did what they wanted. He'd rush home to her from work faster. Then he started staying out longer. She got other men, and he got jealous. One day he saw her with another. They were just talking, but when they got home, Alex was furious, insulting, humiliating, threatening to take the baby away. After that, she was gone in the morning. No belongings, left heartbroken. He looked for her. She was living with another man, demanding nothing, but incredibly violent. He beat her. She ran away. Where to? Unknown. He searched for her for a long time, but to no avail. He wanted to prove to himself and to her that if she came back, he'd made a mistake. So I married Olivia. She was delicate, tender, vulnerable. But later on, she became more daring. He remembered the moment that split their lives apart. After the birth, she came into the office. "Who is this woman, Alex?" She looked up with eyes full of tears. "Beloved," he said with defiance. "What about me, your spouse?" She looked with sadness and hope. "And what about you? Don't you have enough money? What, you don't have enough Miss Universes?" He did not believe in her love. "But hear me, you will never be loved by me again. Money is money. and she walked away with her head held proudly high. Always perfect in public, she conjured up the image of a perfect family. She was surprised. This evening had come as a surprise to him. Taneka, his daughter, the little girl who had kept the fire of life burning in him, was now an adult and would soon be married. Who is this man? Can he make Ashley happy? Just questions. We'd have to get to know each other. And he really hoped that his daughter's chosen one loved her, not the money she had. After all, that happens quite a lot these days. He hoped that his daughter would be happy and not, like him, gaze expectantly at the women passing by, hoping to see the one. He pulled out the pictures. The red-haired girl looked up at him coquettishly from the snapshot as he began to go through the family photos. Olivia was everywhere in them, happy, with a beautiful smile, the happiest possible image. He really thought his spouse was happy with the unlimited limit card she was using, and it turned out that she loved and suffered. Is that so? If the wife has been suffering all this time, living her pain, then maybe it's not too late to change everything. Yet he'd already lost the woman he loved because of his pride. And Olivia, a friend of his 4 decades, always uncomplaining, always near, ready to come to the rescue. So maybe he should try again? But now to meet his daughter's fiancé first. Ashley said she'd get together with him, try to live together. That's what was necessary to get to know his future in-laws. Something inside him told him that his daughter wasn't telling him something, and something out there was clearly wrong. Hey, Olivia. The secretary entered the office where he was sitting in his thoughts. I was wondering, do we have any meetings or events next week? I need to make plans. She came in every Sunday, asking such questions, and then she would plan everything properly and efficiently. No, Olivia. He looked at her extremely carefully. Can you stay? Olivia looked surprised, but stopped, closed the door, walked gracefully to the couch, and sat down. He got up and walked over to her and sat down beside her. Have you really loved me all these years and waited for the attention I didn't give you? Listen to me in a businesslike manner with complete indifference, he asked his wife. Do you know your daughter wants to get married? She said she was in love, but to get married. Olivia was really surprised. Yes, she wants to live with him together from next semester. He sat even closer. What do you think? I think if she loves him, let her try. If it's love, they'll live together no matter what. And if it's not, they'll be divorced quickly, Olivia said wisely. God, she's beautiful, resilient, wise. Why have I never looked at her as a real woman? Always thought she was mercantile from day one, because she was just convenient. And now my daughter has suddenly opened my eyes, he thought. What has this woman done? Why have I tormented her for years, neglecting her and replacing it with money? It's not Olivia's fault that I lost my first love, and then made up my own misery, making her suffer as well. He didn't know how he should start the conversation. Yes, it was all amazing. With his wife, everything was always discussed dryly and specifically, like in the office. Do you believe that she fell in love? Could there be such a thing, he asked, and Olivia looked at him with etymologies full of wonder. Did you love me, he asked in almost a whisper. Olivia was even more surprised, staring and not understanding. I did, she lowered her eyes. And now the man was looking at her penetratingly. Olivia lowered her head and looked away. Gently, he turned her toward him and looked into her eyes. Say yes, but I realized it when you said you loved, and would love someone else all the time, she said, tears welling up in her voice. My darling. Let's try it all over again. He drew her to him and hugged her. Why, she did not understand the changes that had happened to her husband. To be happy, from that day their relationship became completely different. It was as if their feelings had sharpened. They had really decided to make a fresh start. Not a fresh start, but a fresh start. Olivia really had become an incredibly happy woman. She had a man by her side who surrounded her with care and attention that she never, in fact, known. So when her daughter left, she was insanely happy for her parents, realizing that she had a hand in it. And she knew that without her, they would not have started a new phase of their lives, would not have built a new relationship. Her father promised that very soon he would come to meet his future son-in-law. Naturally, Ashley was not very much afraid, but at the same time she realized that without it, it would be impossible to build a future with her chosen one. She actually worried that there might be difficulties in the relationship between her father and Jason. After all, they were so different. Dad clearly knew what he was aiming for. He was always tough. Jason was completely different, soft, gentle, vulnerable. She felt sorry that these two completely different people would have to communicate. She might have a hard time building a relationship. Arriving in town, Ashley went straight to Jason's house. I missed you so much. I feel like we haven't seen each other in forever." She hugged him and wouldn't let go. It seemed to Ashley that if she let him go, he would disappear. There was a calmness in her soul right now around this man. She truly loved him. It was hard without him. When she saw him, she just couldn't tear herself away, hugging and kissing the one person she wanted to be open and real with. "But how was your trip?" He smiled gently and hugged her tightly. It was great. Her trip had had incredible results, but her parents had reconciled, or rather, had become close to each other. The only thing she didn't want to talk about was talking to her father about how she never really told him anything about Jason. "That's fine. Come see my present." It was amazing how this man who'd been a stranger 6 months ago could sense her mood. And she didn't want to talk about the conversation with her father, but he didn't ask. It was like a gut feeling. Was it a gift? She was well aware that he didn't have much money and wouldn't be able to satisfy her wishes. Ashley had long ago decided that she didn't need valuables, rich gifts. She only needed his love, sincere love, and someone in life. With the help of parents, money seeks power and fame. But she didn't need anything, just him around. "I wonder what you want to give me. Are you going to treat me to something?" "But let's go look," she said, leaning on her wand. He took her hand and led her to the garage, opened the door, and before her stood a magnificent vintage, luxurious, rare chair, beautifully restored. Fantastic. She adored things like this. It seemed that the Queen's maid of honor had once sat in this chair. It was amazing how this man had accomplished such a miracle with his own hands. It was most likely an antique chair, and he had restored it, cleaned it, made it beautiful, all for her once upon a time. She used to tell him that she liked that sort of thing. Used to dream that when she had her own house, she'd buy a huge amount of stuff like this. And then she'd met Jason and realized that a lot of the things she used to dream about would never come true. I didn't want to tell him anything about the money. She knew he wouldn't be able to fulfill her desires, and so she shouldn't have made him feel inferior. And now she clearly realized that this close, kind-hearted person felt her very subtly. Even without money, he was trying to realize her dreams. The chair was delightful. She threw herself on his neck, hugged him, and shed tears. And he laughed. Realized they were tears of happiness. He didn't ask any stupid questions. He just smiled, hugged her, and kissed her crying eyes. So the days went by merrily and carefree. Ashley realized that very soon she would become a specialist, go to work. They could live a full, independent life. And she told him she was moving out, and a few days later she did move in. They formed a small but dignified family. Everyone supported and understood each other. He even helped her write her notes. And it was so tender and romantic that Ashley was just thrilled. The only thing that scared her over and over again was that she never told him ever again. And someday she would have to. One day there was a knock on the door. Ashley opened it. It was her father on the doorstep. She'd left the address with her mom just in case. Now she realized it was the wrong decision. She realized there was no other way her dad could have done it. He had just come unannounced, rushed over to talk and see everything with his own eyes. Dad was surprised and heartbroken. Ashley wasn't ready for such a conversation, much less a meeting. Neither was Jason. She was afraid that now Dad might hurt him, and things wouldn't go the way she had planned. They had had such a good life. Everything had been wonderful. And now it might all be ruined because of Dad, who, not understanding the situation, was bound to do something wrong. That would be a shame. Ashley's only hope was that Jason would understand her, that he would understand and forgive her for Dad. Oh yes, he loved her, would understand that she couldn't do otherwise, couldn't leave an address, which meant this situation was inevitable. "You understand, are you surprised? But I decided to come and meet my son-in-law, take a look. How do you live here? Maybe you need some help." Without pausing, the father said. He realized that Ashley was in a certain stupor, but at the same time he couldn't take it anymore. Every day the thought lived in a corner that he had absolutely no idea who he had given his daughter to, who was now in charge of her life and her well-being. So he made a decision for himself to go and figure it all out. Olivia, of course, objected, but he always acted independently and decisively. While the cameraman had her a bag of groceries and started to slowly come around, "Dad, we weren't expecting guests at all," Ashley said trite, meaningless phrases. She realized that there was nothing she could change, nothing to worry about. "I bought everything to set the table." Her father walked into the kitchen, looked around, stunned. Poverty Khrushchevcha with thin walls, a complete lack of any comfort. In the kitchen, an old banished stove, no dishwasher, just a nightmarish environment that cannot be described in words. And he even felt like a rat was about to run through somewhere. Not because it's dirty, but because it's old, shabby, and miserable. Dad went into the living room. How can you call it a living room? A hall with shabby old carpets. Old shabby carpets that come from the Soviet Union. It's a wonder they're still there. Is this really where his daughter lives? You couldn't tell from looking at her that she was unhappy. Smiling, cheerful, fresh. What's going on here? It's so disgusting, so horrible. It's impossible. One room that acted as a living room and a bedroom. Everything here was kind of frozen in time, old cabinets, an intimidating couch. But in the center of this terrifying room was a gorgeous vintage armchair. It was probably the only element here that wasn't disgusting. Where's my future son-in-law? Dad tried to hold back the nausea closing in on him. He went to the store, the daughter practically whispered. She saw the look in the man's eyes. He realized what he was thinking. Realized something terrible was about to happen. I saw the jowls on his cheeks begin to run and the pulse gray on his neck. She realized he was about to explode, and with any luck, he'd be gone before Jason got there, which meant there would be no scandal. But if she was unlucky, the scandal would break when the future son-in-law came in fusion of her father. She was very afraid, but she was even more afraid of losing Jason. So she pulled herself together and looked at her dad with a stern, even stern look. Julie suddenly felt as if she were a small copy of him. She could feel the jowls on her cheeks and the veins in her neck throbbing. "Go away, just go away." Her daughter said it, even with a slight tear in her voice. It seemed that she was about to start the scandal herself. Kick him out of here. Scream and never want to talk to him, scream. Her father turned to her in surprise, looking at her, not understanding how his little princess, delicate, refined, so exquisite, suddenly turned into a resident of a communal apartment, defending her square meters. It would have been a serious scandal if the door hadn't opened and Jason hadn't appeared on the doorstep. But he looked at the stranger who stood next to his beloved in surprise, and guessed it was her father, who always understood everything without words. Sort of sensed it with some inner, almost animal instinct. "Good afternoon." "And we have guests." He extended his hand to her father in a friendly manner. A little confused, Ashley introduced the two to each other. Despite the fact that her father actually turned pale, shook hands with his future son-in-law, looked at him disdainfully, and even disparagingly, took another look. Yes, handsome, athletic, pumped-up figure. But an invalid, standing leaning on a stick, Alex Adamson thought regretfully. It was awful. That is, his beautiful daughter Ashley, who had a huge dowry, unlimited financial opportunities, now lives with a disabled person in the shabby apartment of Khrushchev's time. And the world must have gone mad. It's probably just asleep. I need to pinch myself, wake up soon. But for Alex Adamson, everything was so terrible it seemed unreal. Seating her father with the table in the hall, Ashley surreptitiously began preparing the table with cheesy, old Soviet plates. Somewhere an open crystal vase she poured the salad into. It was all as if he was about to get into a time machine and travel back in time. But Dad held on. As everyone sat down at the table and drank some wine, he suddenly decided to have a final talk with his daughter. He realized that there was no point in stalling. He had to dot his I's and cross his T's. He didn't want to talk to Jason, though. Asked him where he worked. He said computer, so nowhere. And that finally convinced him that he needed to talk to him right now. There was no point in putting off such a serious complaint. His mind was screaming at him to stop. Realized that now he could lose his daughter forever. His grievances were burning her soul. Perhaps sowing a seed of hatred between father and daughter. But temper and some demon that had always been in him screamed, "That's it, say it. Get her out of here. Make it right." "Come on, let's go out to the kitchen," he said, practically hissed. Okay, she didn't take Jason's hand. She could see that he'd gone pale. Sensed the storm coming. "It's going to be okay, honey. Honey, love you." Go in the kitchen. Dad wouldn't even sit on a stool. He looked at everything with eyes full of disgust. "What is all this, Ashley? What is this?" He couldn't hold back his emotions and he was talking loud enough. "I don't know what you're talking about." His daughter turned away from him, trying to make her voice quieter, as if to motivate him to lower the volume too. "I mean what this is all about. You live in this shabby crack house. There's no living space, nothing to attract you. And this man is cute, yes, but he's disabled. Do you realize that he makes absolutely no money? How are you going to live?" He hesitated more and more with each passing second. So this is a man. Is this a man who lives in this shabby room and brought his favorite woman here? The walls in the flats were very thin, so Jason could hear everything. It wasn't pleasant, but he understood why her father was so upset. He probably wouldn't have been thrilled if he were him either. But he also realized that he was precious to Ashley. And he realized that money wasn't the most important thing in life. He didn't want to listen to all that was going on in the kitchen anymore. He started pacing the room, but it was impossible not to hear what was going on in there, and he wanted to come in to say his manly word. And then he realized that all this was meaningless, and it was better to keep silent now. Then his father would leave, and they'd go back to their normal, peaceful lives. Ashley and his father might not talk for a while, but then they would reconcile. Everything will be fine. Her father will eventually accept the situation, or perhaps someday she herself will realize that her father was telling the truth and will leave Jason because of worry and inner discomfort. Now he walked around the room, picking up the souvenirs that were on the shelf and moving them from place to place, as well as his guitar, then decided to just play and sing a song so he couldn't hear what was going on in the kitchen. In fact, to create a background noise, I ran my thin fingers over the guitar strings and then sang. Dad went pale. Ashley thought his lips quivered. Jason played and sang, and her father changed before her eyes. How do you know that song? He was practically screaming. My mother used to sing it to me, Jason said, surprised but confident, unable to understand what was happening. You're from the orphanage. His father seemed to be losing his mind. And she gave me away when I was 7 or 8. He couldn't hide his surprise. What was her name? Ashley's father asked, sitting down on the couch. Alice. Is she alive? I don't know. And that was how fate had brought him to a state where there was an opportunity to correct his mistakes of youth. And this was the same baby he had once rocked in his arms, the son of his only beloved woman, the one he idolized, the one who had made him happy, showed him a whole other vibrant life. He looked at her and realized that the red hair, the green eyes were like Ashley's now more than ever. Another time he realized he had made a mistake. He shouldn't have meddled in his daughter's personal life, and they were happy after all. And maybe that's how happy he would have been with Alice. Together they must have overcome everything. But his insolence, his total control, had changed everything. She left, and then he wandered the world, never able to raise his only child in love and unity. So what can he do to honor his former love? For the woman who made him happy and essentially created him as he is now. It is to give his daughter and son the opportunity to be happy. When he heard the first lines of the song, he realized that these were the very poems his beloved had written to him, poems he remembered all his life. From that moment on, Alex Adamson became more attentive to people and decided to be home more with his wife. By appointing an executive and director in his firm, gave his daughter and son-in-law, who quickly won his heart with his good nature, a house where everything was perfect, told the young ones about his love, talked to Jason a lot about his mother, whom he hardly knew, or showed the photos he'd saved, which he gave away. Jason and Ashley were building their carefree, happy future in their new home. His father paid for the surgery to fix his chromosome and allowed him to run the company website, which allowed him to have company web-channel clients. And Olivia gained more than just a loved one who finally paid attention to her and showered her with love. To Mary Johnson was preparing to become a mother again.
You need to get married, Cindy, my friend and colleague Sarah said with a sigh, shoveling mashed potatoes into a plastic bucket. But first, a torrid, heady affair. Lelka makes a good point, Selena remarked. At least the rest of your life will be normal. Well, what did you see with that monster? Bruises, covered with foundation cream, and the fact that you with Billy in your arms hid in the neighborhood. Of course, the dead are either good or nothing but the truth, finished Ariana, Cindy's classmate, in a deep voice. By the way, that's what the saying really sounds like. Cindy was organizing the leftover sausage, smoked fish, and chopped vegetables from her husband Lucy's 40th birthday memorial dinner into containers. Oh, girls, for God's sake, the widow grinned sadly. Barry's soul can hear everything till he's 40. And let it hear, said Selena as if she had said. Let him hear everything. How much have you endured from him in your lifetime? And then, what if that monster is only happy for you? Oh, come on, Cindy said. What's Billy going to say? Daddy's dead, and Mommy's already got a new uncle in the house. Please, Sarah rolled her eyes. First of all, you haven't brought anyone home yet. Secondly, it's a step you have to take, and it's going to take time. A year from now, and no one will judge you. How old is your Billy now? 12, the widow replied with a sigh. Oh boy, let me guess. He spends his time either with his friends or on the computer, right? Well, yes, she smiled weakly. And then the girls will start, Ariana noted. And then before you know it, the guy's married. What about you? What about me? Cindy shrugged. I'll be babysitting grandchildren. It's all clear, summarized the classmate, and looking at her friends, waved her hands. She's incorrigible. She's going to follow Barry and not even know what it's like to live life to the fullest and be truly happy. Cindy, don't you want to live for yourself? I don't know, she admitted. I hadn't really thought about it. Well, maybe it's time to think about it. What's 32? Juicy, Selena said. Exactly. God, Cindy, if you want to cry for your husband, then cry and move on. I don't think he's worth it, though. He wouldn't appreciate it. Oh, guys, it's complicated. Cindy shook her head. I need to get back on track. Then I can think about myself. The friends looked at each other with a faint glance. Somehow they didn't believe that would be the case. So far they had heard only words. That was just the way this woman was. Cindy thought of others first, and only then of herself. She was also afraid of change. But deep down, somewhere in the bottom of her heart, Cindy knew her friends were right. And change had already come, so maybe. Selena said when all the food and drinks had been put away, and you lie down and rest, you're exhausted. Yes, I will, nodded Cindy. Thanks, girls. After she had seen her friends off, she lay down on the bed, but she didn't feel like sleeping. Cindy sank into her memories. Barry and Cindy had started dating when she was a freshman in medical school. There probably wasn't a student in the entire college who hadn't noticed the beautiful blue-eyed brunette with the chiseled figure. And classmate Anthony was in love with her. But one of the first college beauties made a choice outside the institution, and he, to put it mildly, puzzled everyone who knew her. Cindy's lover, the leader of the local Gopniks, worked as a handyman in some Sharashkana office one day. The hero of her novel wasn't handsome, and he wasn't fearful either. But with one look at Barry, it wasn't hard to realize that his intelligence was in trouble. The guy wore tracksuits, shaved his head, and despised perfume. A man should smell like a man, he told his subordinates. Having finished 9 grades with a squeak, Barry decided that was enough. He considered further education a waste of time and called all students slackers, squandering their parents' money. A real man should earn money, not sit behind a desk, Barry cut off. I finished school, I can read, I can write, I can count money. What else do you need? When Cindy timidly stammered about the fact that with education more chances to get a good job, the lover only condescendingly flicked the girl on the nose and said, "Much you understand. All this reasoning slobbering and mama's boys. And a real tough guy will not waste time on some kind of study." Barry was contemptuous of such things as candy bouquet period, modest but nice gifts, some kind not on business, but just because a man missed another, as he put it, callow tenderness. "And I am not a heifer," he told his beloved. "I am a concrete man, standing firmly on his feet." When Cindy realized that romance was out of the question, she wasn't upset. And really, what was the point of all this? After all, she had a real tough guy by her side, and everything else was nothing. However, it was not only in the disregard for education and lack of attention to the girl. Much scarier was another thing. From time to time, Barry raised his hand to Cindy, humiliated her in public, and told his friends that he was doing it for educational purposes. When the friends found out about it, they were horrified. Love is evil, of course, but still. "Cindy, you're an interesting and educated girl," her friend and classmate Ariana reprimanded her. "Well, what the hell do you want with that roughneck? And he has his hands all over you. With your smarts and looks, you could get a guy that everyone would be jealous of." "It's Barry I want," Cindy said stubbornly. "I love him. He's great. He just needs to be understood. And anyway, it's our relationship." "What kind of relationship is that?" exclaimed her friend. "If he lets himself raise his hand to you now, what will happen if you, God forbid, get married?" "Why, God forbid?" the girl asked with a grin. "We'll get married anyway, and everything will be fine." "No, you're definitely zombified," Ariana summarized, and for the sake of convincing, she added, "It's only going to get worse." The two friends had a big fight and didn't speak to each other until they graduated from high school. Then their paths parted for some time. Angelica, the girl's mother, also shook her head in bewilderment. "Cindy, you're beautiful," she said, putting ointment on her daughter's black eye. "Aren't there any decent guys in college?" Probably there are, shrugged the girl in love. But I don't like anyone. Their ponytails and bob, yuck. And they're all kind of stiff or something. Excuse me, please. Basically, if I may, boring. What's wrong with that? Angelique wondered, thinking, that Barry seems to have thoroughly brainwashed her. That's just the way people talk, in case you didn't know it. Besides, guys are in school, which means they're thinking about tomorrow. In about 5 or 6 years, they'll cut their ponytails and brown hair and smile about their college image. And they'll be dressing up their wives like dolls and taking them on vacations. We'll be fine too, Cindy argued. Yeah, Mother snorted. And what, I wondered, good things were in store for you. Domestic violence and poverty, and mind you, they don't change. Unless you're 60, when you won't have the strength to swing your fists. But Cindy wasn't convinced by any reasonable arguments, especially since she had an ally in Barry's mother. A few years ago, Betty had married and bore her young husband a son and a daughter. The grown son immediately became an extra in the apartment, and the happy wife and mother tried her best. Betty had 2 older children, daughter Veronica and son Arnold. Both of them already had families of their own. Now it was up to Barry. He's a good kid, just a hothead, Betty advertised of her troublemaking offspring. Barry just needs a woman to steer him in the right direction, and he'll be different in no time. Tame and domestic. Cindy befriended Betty, not even realizing that the cunning woman was using the knave girl for her own purposes. But it was clear to those around her. Wake up. Angelica shook her hands in response to the reproach that her aunt understood her better than her own mother. She sleeps and sees how she could get her treasure and send her away from home. Well, and in your eyes, she wants to seem like a cool democratic aunt. Why? It's convenient to be kind at other people's expense. But where will her kindness go when it comes to business? That's not true. Cindy said no. Aunt Betty's a good person. Aunt Betty's a phony, the mother said, lamenting how blinded her daughter's eyes were. It's all love. Harvey, Cindy's father, threatened to beat up his daughter's beau, but his wife only sighed and said, "It's no use. It's no use." "But we've got to do something," he exclaimed. "What, Harvey, what?" Until Cindy realizes what she's in for, nothing will change. In our situation, only time will make things right. And it has, not the way Cindy's parents expected. One day, Angelica got a call from Betty saying they needed to talk. About what? The girl's mother asked calmly, but a bad feeling had already taken hold of her. "Let's not talk on the phone," replied the parent of the hated Barry. "Could you and Harvey come over at 7 o'clock? Well, all right. With Harvey? The poor woman pondered what that meant, but as it was, only one thought came to mind, and it was not a happy one. All right. Why guess in vain? She finally decided. Angelica's worst fears were realized. When she and Harvey arrived at the Wesleys, the young ones were informed that Cindy was already 12 weeks pregnant. Angelica fearfully covered her mouth with the palm of her hand, and Betty said, "Tomorrow our babies are on their way to apply." "Oh my God," Angelica exclaimed. "That's what I was afraid of." I couldn't tell from the look on Harvey's face that he was excited about the prospect of becoming a father-in-law either. At least not for the next few years, and not to this man. What's wrong with that? Betty went on the offensive. "You're marrying your daughter to a man from a respectable family. He doesn't mind marrying. Everything's honorable, as it should be among decent people." "You're the decent one?" thought Angelique, but she said nothing. Only a scandal was not enough. "He works," continued the loving mother. "The family will be able to provide." "Of course I can," Barry said. "I'm a normal man. I understand." "A normal man would never lay a hand on a woman," Harvey pointed out with an angry glare. "He'll change," Betty said, poking her son in the side with her elbow. "I'll change," he repeated obediently. "Yes, but studying," the mother-in-law whispered. "What about school?" Betty snorted. "No one suggests dropping out of school." "Really?" Angelica sarcastically exclaimed and turned to her daughter. "Do you realize that your husband will not let you study? You will go on sabbatical leave, and something tells me that you will not come out of it." "She will be transferred to the correspondence department," triumphantly declared the future sister-in-law. Remembering that, except for 9 grades of secondary school, Betty had not received any education, Angelica grinned. Otherwise, she would have known that correspondence courses are not available for every specialty, and it certainly does not apply to medicine. I wonder how it is possible to study medicine by correspondence. Angelica asked her daughter, "Why don't you say something? Enlighten Aunt Betty." Cindy sat with her head down. "I'm not going to go into academia at all," she said. "I'm going to go to classes and take care of the baby." "Oh, you're a sweetheart." Her mother shook her hands. "And how do you imagine it? Who's going to take care of the baby while you're at school?" "I, as you know, work." "Then you can work all you want," Betty said. "I'll take care of the baby." Angelica could hardly believe it, but being a smart woman, she preferred not to say anything. What was the use of letting her stilettos go? It would only turn her daughter against herself. Cindy needed a mother's support right now. It was clear that nothing good would come out of this marriage, but why kill the girl? It's wiser to save your strength for the future, and it will come in handy. "I see that you have already decided everything," said Angelica. The woman had to do her best to keep her voice from sounding doomed, and she seemed to have succeeded. "Well, Cindy, you can always count on Daddy and me." "Yes, daughter," Harvey nodded. "We'll always be there for you." "Well, that's different," said Betty in a satisfied voice, and the future in-laws agreed to meet over the weekend to discuss the details of the upcoming marriage and to celebrate the engagement. And Mom was right, wasn't she? And so was everyone else. How many times had Cindy said that phrase to herself? 100, 1,000, or more? Alas, after the wedding, her life was not for the better. The bride's parents had insisted on celebrating the marriage in a cafe, but Betty had snorted dismissively. Why spend money when you can leave it to the young people to live on? A wedding can be celebrated at home. That's the way it's been done for centuries. The first day was celebrated at the groom's house, the second at the bride's house. When Cindy learned that the wedding party would be held at home, she was disappointed, but she didn't let on. Maybe it's for the best, she thought. After all, I'm pregnant, and I don't really need a noisy celebration in a pub. The girl realized that she was talking herself into it. After all, the wedding, which is a lot of young people, cannot be quiet and rank. But the main thing is that we love each other, Cindy summed up, and the argument seemed to her quite weighty. Cindy's health left much to be desired, and the cheapest and not too elegant dress, bought by Valerie, emphasized her interesting position. The happy groom now and then unceremoniously and without a hint of tenderness to the future baby grabbed Cindy's belly, and at the same time looked proudly and meaningfully at his friends. "Look at me, I'm an eagle." Cindy was terribly unpleasant, but then she wrote it all off to nervousness, which is normal for a bride who is pregnant. The happy newlywed had been drinking himself to shreds and behaving outrageously. Barry squeezed the bride, and she, instead of making a remark to her new husband, smiled strangely, as if begging the guests to be more lenient. He kissed the lips of all the women present, sprinkling them with thick booze. And when the boyfriend of Elizabeth, Cindy's college friend, said that it was wrong to do that, he exclaimed indignantly, "Do you know who I am?" "I warned you," the young man said with an undercurrent of menace and walked away, not wanting the conflict. At the end of the evening, the newlywed climbed up on the table, took off his jacket and threw it on the floor, waving it vigorously in the air. "I married an awesome hottie today," he shouted. "I did it. I'm the coolest alpha male ever. Yo ho 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 whoa." His friends whistled back so encouragingly that the guests' ears popped. Cindy wanted to cry. Barry, either accidentally or in a fit of emotion, kicked a vase of Olivier. The salad instantly landed on his father-in-law's new suit, who was standing nearby. Harvey's face turned purple with anger, but not to spoil his daughter's holiday. Though what was going on looked less like a party than anything else in the world. The father of the bride looked at Angelica and realized that his wife had obviously thought the same thing. This was not how they had envisioned their only daughter's wedding. Cindy looked at her parents and looked down at them. "Dreaming, you idiot, of a beautiful wedding." She mocked herself. Enjoy it. The second day of the wedding, according to tradition, which so honored Betty, celebrated in the apartment of the bride's parents. After the party, the guests took a stroll through the city. The bridegroom had done well here too. He walked with Cindy in his arms and shouted obscenities to the approving cackling of his gopnik friends. "It's nothing," Betty said soothingly. From now on, the mother-in-law would take a moment to make fun of him and calm down. It's a wedding after all. Yes, the daughter-in-law nodded with a forced smile. I understand. She wanted so much to believe that what Betty had said was true and that everything would be all right. But just as Ariana, with whom they'd already reconciled, had predicted, things had only gotten worse. A friend was also present at the wedding and was shocked. The sacramental phrase, "I warned you," remained unspoken. It was more important to support the friend who was already having a hard time. On Monday evening, when Barry had recovered from his hangover, the young couple went to look at their new home. They were to live in a private house on the outskirts of town. As the new husband explained to Cindy, his late grandmother used to live there. "How do you like it here?" Barry asked. The young wife didn't know what to say. The impressive layer of dust and numerous cobwebs, to put it mildly, did not inspire enthusiasm. "Well, it's okay," Cindy replied hesitantly. "I don't get it," the husband said with a barely perceptible but still threatening tone. "What's wrong with you? It's not like you're a lady. You can clean, wash, and all that." "But won't you help me?" she asked confusedly. "Listen," Barry answered carelessly, "it's your woman's business. My mom handled everything on her own." Yeah, I think that was the first time Cindy had ever thought unflatteringly of her mother-in-law. She was especially good at giving birth like a wind-up. At this point, Cindy feared her hubby might beat her. Judging by the look on Lucy's face, that was exactly what he intended to do. At least, that's what he was thinking of doing. Cindy knew the tone and the stare all too well, so she prudently decided to stay out of it. "Well then, I'll do it too," she said, trying to sound cheerful. "What was I saying?" Barry said in a patronizing tone. "No, of course, I'll help you move cabinets, beds. I'm not a complete moron. I realize you need to keep our son safe." "Why a son?" the young woman asked with a smile. "What if we have a girl?" "Real men are born only sons," condescendingly said the husband. "That's it. I've shown you the work to be done." When they got back to the Weasley's house, Betty asked her daughter-in-law, "How do you like the house?" "It's a good house," Cindy nodded discreetly. "Oh my," her mother-in-law said smugly, "you'll have your own place. Imagine what would happen if you married some college kid." The daughter-in-law only shrugged her shoulders. "That's right, nothing good," Betty summed up in her favorite triumphant tone. "We'd be living in rented apartments, and with us everything will be fine. And the main thing is that Valerka loves you very much." Who knows, maybe Valerka really loved his wife, but it seems he kept it carefully hidden. A month without abuse seemed like a fairy tale to Cindy, except that every fairy tale, even the longest one, comes to an end sooner or later. One day, Cindy was late for college. She was studying for the winter session and had to spend a lot of time in the library. "What the hell's a winter session?" Barry snapped at her. "There's nothing to eat at home, and she's in libraries." "I made a whole pot of borscht yesterday," Cindy said. Also, a powerful blow to the forehead stopped her from finishing. The young woman didn't even realize what it was. She just felt a shower of sparks come out of her eyes. And when Cindy blinked, she saw her husband's angry face. "More?" he asked, frighteningly calm. "No? Then go ahead and make me something quick." Cindy made scrambled eggs with lard, toast, and herbs. Barry, after eating his supper, was visibly relieved. "Are you offended?" he asked conciliatingly. "You shouldn't be. You'll thank me for guiding you to the right path." It was only as he finished his admonition that Barry remembered that his pregnant wife hadn't had dinner. "Look, Cindy, I ate all of it, okay?" he asked. "Well, you better make yourself something. You gotta eat well and all that." "Nothing. I'm fine," Cindy assured him. "Oh, all right then." Barry muttered to himself and grabbed a bottle of beer from the refrigerator and went to watch TV. With a sigh, the pregnant wife took out bread, eggs, and a bunch of greens. After a little thought, Cindy decided to add some lard. Cindy's pregnancy was not easy, and in the 6th month, she took a leave of absence and went into labor. "What's the news?" Barry exclaimed when he heard about the hospitalization. "The news is that I'm in danger of miscarrying," Cindy replied calmly. "In such cases, they usually put you in the hospital." "A threatened miscarriage?" my husband asked incredulously. "Really? That's like when the baby isn't born, right?" "Yes," the mother-to-be answered with a sigh and smiled involuntarily. When Barry talked about the future baby, He looked so touching that Cindy forgot about the main family problem. Well, then, of course, Barry nodded. Go to your preservation or wherever. I want a healthy son. He'll be born healthy, Cindy smiled again. Watch me, my husband threatened, either jokingly or seriously. The month in the hospital was another favorable period in the young woman's life. Between the honeymoon and the hospital stay, Cindy truly realized how defenseless she was to her husband. Barry could get mad over the most insignificant thing, like not enough soup or too long, in his opinion, talking on the phone. And he didn't care if his mother called, let alone his friends. In moments of anger, the husband went on a rampage. In addition to violence, he used the most vile and disgusting words Barry could think of, and she would endure it without complaint. Cindy tried to tell her mother-in-law, but she quickly shut her down. No, said Betty. You've got your own family now, so you're on your own. You saw what you were buying. That's when Cindy realized how right her mother had been about her mother-in-law and everything else. It was obvious that Betty's promise to take care of the baby while Cindy was at school wasn't worth a dime. So it looked like the sabbatical was going to be a long one, if school doesn't just fall through the cracks, and something told me it would. When a tired, exhausted, and frightened Cindy arrived at the hospital, the doctor had no trouble determining what was going on in her family. The multicolored bruises all over her body were more eloquent than any words. Maria, the attending physician, examined Cindy, and as she dressed and was about to leave the exam room, the woman asked sympathetically, "This is not my case, but why don't you go to court or at least to the police? For what do you put up with the abuse of yourself and your future child? Do you even realize that an unhealthy family environment can affect the psyche of the unborn child? If you don't want to think about yourself, think about the baby." Cindy cried bitterly. Now, calm down," the kind woman said quietly, hugging her. "What do you think you're doing, crying? You mustn't worry. I will no longer embarrass," whispered the future mother. "I'll try." "You'll do your best," Maria said with feigned severity. That's it, my good girl. Next." 2 weeks later, Cindy was discharged. Her parents picked her up from the hospital. "Why don't we go back to our place?" Angelica suggested it. Though tempted, Cindy declined. But at home, she was surprised to find an unkempt girl. It seemed she lived on the next street over. "Oh," the girl squeaked when she saw Cindy. The young woman jumped out of the house and ran for her life. She walked at a brisk pace, greedily breathing in the February, almost spring air, while tears covered everything around her. Cindy wanted to call her parents, but changed her mind. No need to upset them. She reached the small public garden and sank down tiredly on a bench. Her cell phone rang. "Ariana." "Hello." No matter how hard Cindy tried to hold back her tears, her friend understood. "Cindy, are you crying? What's wrong?" "Cindy, don't be silent," Ariana persisted. Barry what? "Are you home now or are you still in the hospital?" Tears were getting in the way of my speech. I'm home," Cindy sobbed. "I mean, not really." "Cindy, I don't understand you," Ariana said in desperation. "Where are you?" "In the public garden, not far from the house." "Why are you there?" the classmate asked. "It's not May." When Cindy finally managed to pull herself together and told her friend what had happened, she immediately said, "Okay, call a cab and come to my place. I'll pay for it." "Oh, Cindy, I don't know," Ariana said an hour later when they were having tea. "I'd leave if I were you." "Why?" "It's an option, by the way. Your parents are good, and they'll help you raise your child." "Well, nothing good awaits you. Not only does he have his hands out, but he brings all sorts of weirdos into the house. God forbid, she bring in some kind of disease." Cindy sighed. Easy to say, but hard to do. Though it seemed easy to pack her things, move back to her parents' house, and then file for divorce. But now she realized that domestic tyrants, it turns out, are excellent psychologists. They morally pressurize their victims, skillfully using both the stick, that is intimidation and threats, and carrot. Under the carrot should be understood as apologies and excuses. Say, "I was tired, it was a hard day." When Barry apologized, he looked like a child who had done something wrong. His spouse's remorse seemed sincere, and Cindy felt sorry for him. "Who's going to feel sorry for you?" An inner voice whispered, "Certainly not him." There was nothing to say, but Cindy didn't do anything about it. Her parents would help, of course, she sighed. Yeah, maybe, but I'd hate to involve them, and frankly, I'm afraid of change. Well, as you know, Ariana shook her head and taking her friend's hand in hers added, "But know that the doors of our apartment are always open to you." "I know," Cindy said quietly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Thank you." "Okay, you don't have to cry. Maybe you want to sleep." "I'm always sleepy now," she said with a smile. "Then go to bed," Ariana said and put her arm around her shoulders and took her to her room. Sleep is a great medicine in Jimru, and tonight Mom promised to make fish pie. It'd be delicious. That afternoon, Cindy slept over at a classmate's house, and the next morning, her husband showed up. Barry apologized profusely and said they were made for each other. Eventually, Cindy went home with her husband. Billy was born on April 12th, Cosmonaut's Day. "He's gonna be an astronaut," laughed Cindy's parents, and the newly minted young father said, holding the warm blue bundle in his hands, "I'll make a real man out of him. You and me, and we'll make such a mess." Betty smiled proudly. It seemed that this woman was about to swell with pride and burst like a soap bubble. Much to Cindy's displeasure, the gang of thugs was also here. Just like at the wedding, they made vulgar remarks, ignoring the staff. And when a doctor reprimanded them, one of the thugs responded, "It's okay, Dad." Cindy's parents smiled, but her daughter realized how much effort it had cost them. "Congratulations," said Angelica, handing the young parents a branded bag with rattles and a large package of diapers. "Thank you, mother-in-law," cheerfully answered Barry. "God forbid it's not the last time." "God forbid," Angelica thought with a shudder. There's only one to raise, with a father like that. Further family life of the couple Guryanov developed according to the scenario, which Angelica feared. No, for the first month everything was fine. Barry found a part-time job, and all the money he earned gave his wife, leaving himself a trifle for lunch. He didn't drink, and after work he'd rush home and coo over Billy. "Kid," Barry said fondly. "Man." The young mother's heart sank with emotion, and in her soul a time-it sprout of Cindy for happiness was budding. In a month's time the spouse was the same. He began again to raise his hand against his wife. The most frequent cause for abuse was the baby's crying. "Shut him up," Barry said irritably. Cindy would soothe, and if he wouldn't shut up, her husband would tastefully proceed. "What kind of mother are you if you can't quiet the baby?" he said. Studying, as Cindy's mother and then Cindy herself had expected, was a dead end. 2 years had passed and it was time to take a sabbatical. Barry strongly resisted. "A woman's place is at home with a baby and a stove." He cut him off. "But I have to finish my studies," Cindy pointed out, "and Billy could go to daycare." But there was no room at the daycare center, and the first in line were children 3 and older. Angelica needed to finish her seniority. "No, well, if necessary, I'll think of something," said the mother. "No, Mom, you don't have to," Cindy said. "No, I'm the one who made this mess. I'm the one who's got to think." "Well, what about your mother-in-law?" Dad asked. "I remember her beating her chest, saying she'd babysit the baby." "And the mother-in-law is deflated," the young woman said with a wry grin. Eventually, Cindy was expelled for not starting classes. The young mother was worried, but her husband reassured her. In his own way, of course. "What are you worrying about? Why does a woman need an education?" Barry ranted. Cindy sighed. It was useless to explain to a man who had decided not to burden himself with education that sooner or later it would come back to bite him in the ass. She recalled how she had been disappointed that she had not gotten into medical school after high school and had been advised to apply to college. And that's where Cindy got lucky. After medical school, she planned to try again to get into college. God, how many plans and ambitions were there? The young woman thought, and she wanted to howl with self-pity. "Come on, everything is fine," cheerfully said the husband, clumsily kissing his wife on the forehead. "I'll go to the boys. That's it, I'm gone." And he was gone. God, I'm such an idiot, thought Cindy once again. It looked like the dream of becoming a doctor would have to be buried under the rubble of routine and happiness. And was there ever any happiness? A year later, Billy went to kindergarten, and Harvey and Angelica suggested that their daughter enroll in a paid secretarial course. After a short consideration, Cindy agreed. As a married woman, she was ashamed to accept material help from her parents, but there was no way out. With the pennies Barry received and the children's allowance, she couldn't do much with it. But Cindy would get a job and the money would be easier to come by. When Barry found out his wife had enrolled in the course, he made a big fuss. "You want to be a secretary?" he yelled. "You think I don't know what you're thinking?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Cindy said in a trembling voice. "You know what you mean." Her husband raged and swung at her. "Don't hit mommy," Billy shouted bravely, and that made the tyrant even more angry. "You little puppy," he exclaimed indignantly. "I'll have you now." But Cindy nimbly picked her son up and ran outside. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she said, crying, and walked on her way. "It's almost like that, but with Billy under my heart," Cindy thought bitterly as she remembered her return from the hospital. "How far are we going?" Cindy heard a vaguely familiar woman's voice and, realizing that she had almost knocked the young woman down, hurried to apologize. "It's okay, it's no big deal," the woman smiled. "How far are we in a hurry?" "No reason," she said, embarrassed. "Daddy wanted to hit mommy and I didn't let him, like an adult," Billy replied. "Good girl, mommy's protector is growing up," replied the woman and suddenly commanded, "Come on, let's go to me. By the way, let's get acquainted. My name is Selena." "Cindy," the young woman introduced herself with a smile. "And my son's name is Billy." "That's a good name," Selena said approvingly. "And he's a great kid. Come on, let's go, let's go." Selena lived in the alley that led to the end of their street. "I haven't seen you around here before," Cindy said thoughtfully. "Maybe not," nodded the new acquaintance. "I've been here a little over a month. My grandmother was buried 6 months ago, so I took the inheritance. There's that house." "Oh yes," Cindy nodded, remembering the old woman who used to live here. "I think her name was Martha and she hadn't been out of the house lately." "Do you often run away from your husband like that?" Selena asked, when the rest of the apple pie was eaten and the tea was drunk. "Occasionally," Cindy replied evasively. "And then apologies, reconciliation, a temporary lull, and then it's back to normal," she sighed. "I know the story." "Have you had that happen to you?" she asked in surprise. Looking at the cheerful, companionable woman, Cindy couldn't believe she had the same problems. "You," Selena corrected with a smile. "No, I've been spared, but my cousin had." "She did?" "Yes, but thank God, it's all behind her now. She's remarried now, and her new husband loves her to pieces." "How did she do it?" "How?" Selena shrugged. "One day Maria packed up her things, said she was tired of being patient, and gave the brawler a goodbye." "That's a lot to take in," Cindy said sadly. "So I guess I'm a sucker. It's in your hands." And that was the day Cindy made a new friend. Selena offered to let her and her son spend the night, and they stayed. And then she came home, apologizing and swearing, "I won't hurt you." And I didn't. But after a month, it was back to normal. Cindy was taking secretarial classes, and Barry suspected her of all sins. Whenever Cindy was late, her husband would get hysterical. She knew she had to make a change, but she was still afraid of change. "What are you afraid of?" Ariana wondered. "You have to work somewhere, one way or another. Who's going to pay your pension? Barry?" After graduating, Cindy took a job as a secretary at the school. Oddly enough, Barry was cool about it. Cindy assumed that her husband thought the school was a place where no one would infringe on her honor, and she was not far from the truth. In Barry's mind, it was a place where his wife wouldn't give him the horns. It was high school. At her new job, she made friends with Sarah, a cheerful, pretty, black-eyed brunette with a short, stylish haircut. They were the same age, so they hit it off quickly. Sarah taught computer science. When Sarah told her that she was graduating from Teachers College this year, Cindy suddenly felt sad. Now she could finish college and try her luck at medical school. What's the problem? Sarah wondered, "How old are you?" "Yeah, and what would I have to live on while I was in school?" Cindy grinned. Sadly, it looked like that train had left. "Oh, never say never," her coworker shook her head with a smile. When Billy went to first grade, Barry was offered a job as a trucker for a logistics company that was gaining momentum. Why, he told his wife over dinner, I got the right category. And they promised good money. That's great, Cindy smiled. The couple was in a quiet period now, and looking at them, no one would have guessed the problems in the family. Cindy tried to remember the good times and sadly recognized that they were sadly few. However, Lucy's successful employment with a private logistics company had been one of the brightest and most positive moments. And it was not only, and not so much about money, the employer hadn't cheated. Barry was really starting to make a decent living. But besides that, Cindy saw another plus. Sometimes her husband would be away for a week or even a month. Quite often, Barry would come back for a day or two, and then he'd be off again. He just didn't have time for abuse. In the absence of her husband, Cindy, though she was afraid to admit it even to herself, rested her soul. She looked better, began to go out with her friends to caves, shopping, or to the sauna. Son also pleased. The woman recalled with horror how nervous and withdrawn was Billy because of their scandals. But now he became calmer, more collected, and studied better at school. Feeling that life seemed to be getting better, Cindy cheered up. But the joy was premature. One day, returning from another long voyage, Barry mumbled, "We're talking." "I'm listening," nodded his wife warily. From Barry's tone, the conversation was unlikely to be pleasant. Cindy was afraid to even think about continuing it. "Listen to me," he said sharply. "If I find out you're seeing someone, I'll blow your head off and his, you know me." Cindy did. "Except it'd be nice to know what this is all about, wouldn't it? And don't give me the sheep eyes," Barry shouted. "What's the matter?" the wife exclaimed in bewilderment. "What the hell were you doing in the sauna?" he asked in a sly but unkind tone. "In the sauna?" Cindy repeated the question. "In the sauna, in the sauna. What do you do in a sauna?" Cindy shrugged her shoulders. "Warming up, steaming, swimming in the pool." Barry noticed that she was different, more self-confident or something. She looked different too. Fresher, better looking, more rested. He didn't like it and had an interesting thought. "There's someone else," Barry thought angrily. "I'd better find out who. Then we'll all be in trouble." "Warming, steaming, swimming," he repeated mockingly. "That's it. What else do you want to know?" Cindy asked indifferently. "Don't play dumb with me," he yelled. "You want to embarrass me? When my husband walks out the door, you go to the saunas? You, wife, mother?" Barry, she was astonished to realize that her husband suspected her of infidelity. "What makes you think I'm cheating on you?" "I was just told that you were in the sauna," Barry said in a confused voice, which was amusing. "So?" Cindy snorted. "Do you think they only do, naughty things in the sauna?" "Well," he said, and his wife grinned mentally. "I guess this is the kind of thing where they say the hat on the thief is on fire." It was strange that Barry didn't fight this time. "It wasn't weird," Sarah said thoughtfully when Cindy told her co-worker about it. "It's just that you're different now. You're prettier and, more importantly, more confident, so he didn't dare hit you. And you know what? Your abuser is afraid of losing you." Cindy was glad to hear that. Maybe there was a holiday coming up on her street too. Cindy returned from her lunch break and was taking her desk when she received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, we don't know your name," said the caller. "Are you Barry's wife?" "Yes, that's correct," answered Cindy. "I'm sorry, but your husband was killed in a car accident. Would you be able to come down for a lineup?" "Yes, of course," she replied, and suddenly a pair of golden red goosebumps flickered in front of her eyes. Must be the pressure. Cindy grimaced and rubbed her temples. The principal came into the waiting room. "Are you all right?" Boris Mikhailovich asked, looking at her intently. "Yes, no, my husband died." At her husband's funeral, Cindy had mixed feelings. She was truly sorry for Lucy, who had died in the prime of life, but listening to herself, she realized that she did not feel deep sorrow as befitted a widow. "Apparently my love has burned out," the widow decided. Cindy tried to cry at least for the sake of decency, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't squeeze out a tear. She looked at her son. Billy was as serious as ever, and he wasn't crying either. The mother-in-law walked up to them. If Cindy had known it was her, she never would have believed it. Betty was graying, her face was completely white, and there were deep creases in the corners of her mouth. "How are you?" Cindy asked sympathetically, intending to hug Betty. She's still asking. Her mother-in-law roared, her voice sounding frightening. Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You're the one who drove him into the coffin. What are you talking about? Cindy was stunned. I'm telling you what I know. If it wasn't for you, he wouldn't have gotten that damn job. You're the one who couldn't get enough money. Damn you! Damn you! Damn you! Screamed the inconsolable mother. Billy blocked his mother with himself and said bravely, "It's not true." "Mom, calm down, son," Arnold reassured Betty. "Cindy, for God's sake." "I'm sorry. You realize?" "Yes, of course," she nodded. "Of course I do." Arnold and some other guy took the sobbing woman away, and Cindy clung to Pasha and whispered, "My protector." And then she let the tears flow. A couple days later, Cindy called Betty. "Cindy," she said in a muffled voice, "I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was saying. And I'm sorry about Barry too. He's been a pain in the ass." "Oh no," my sister-in-law exclaimed. "He who remembers old times is the one who's out of sight." "You're kind," sighed Betty. "I, Nadenka, here's something else to call. I've been thinking, let's all come to my place for 9 days." "Okay," agreed Cindy. "I'll talk to the girls. They'll help with dinner." "That'd be great. Thank you, daughter." The 40th birthday party was at the house where the young Guryanovs lived. "Daughter," said Betty when the women were alone, "you can live in this house as long as you want. I bequeathed it to my granddaughter. It's a place to live." "Thank you, Betty," Cindy replied, and the women hugged. "Don't forget the old woman," she smiled sadly. Of course, smiled back at her sister-in-law and another. "If you need help, don't hesitate. We're not strangers after all." "Too bad for her," she said with a sigh to Ariana, Sarah, and Celine, who had volunteered to help clear the table. "That's for sure," Ariana nodded. "No one would wish to bury their own child, but one must move on with one's life. Your life, for example, you might say is just beginning." Cindy could see where her friend was going. Well, it's about to start. As the memories lulled her to sleep, Cindy fell asleep. When she woke up at 6 in the morning without an alarm clock, she felt an unprecedented rush of energy. She was no longer afraid of change. With a sweet stretch, Cindy got out of bed without hurrying. Today, she wanted to make breakfast for herself and her son. Not scrambled eggs or sandwiches, but something special. Playfully finishing her breakfast, Cindy began to dress up. When Billy awoke to the appetizing smells, his mother was already in full dress. "Mom, you look so pretty today," exclaimed the son. Cindy was very pleased to receive a compliment from her son. But the woman suddenly realized with horror that she didn't know how to respond. "I just had a good night's sleep," she smiled. "Well, yes," Billy nodded. "You went to bed early last night. I got in at 9, and you were already asleep." "Yes," nodded his mother in response. "I've been so tired lately. I'm exhausted. I'm so sleepy." "Well, let's have breakfast, or you'll be late for school. I've fried some meat dumplings, and here's some stuffed tomatoes." That's the theme. We're having a royal breakfast today." "You bet. Eat up, my good man." Cindy was on her way home from work, and as she passed the office of the medical center, she saw an ad that read, "Administrator wanted." Obeying a sudden impulse, the young woman determinedly pulled the door open. What a laugh, she thought. Unfinished medical school with 10 years experience as a school secretary. That's quite the track record. Cindy was about to turn around and walk away when a handsome man in his 40s, wearing an impeccably tailored dark gray suit, inexplicably appeared next to her. "What do you want?" he asked, smiling affably. "I'm about... No, I think I'll go," Cindy blurted out. "You're here about something, but you're leaving already," the man laughed. "Well, no, I'm not letting you go now that you're here. I take it you're here about the job." The man asked the HR manager, whose name was Max. "Ah, been there, done that." "Well, yes," Cindy decided. "Why did you choose our company?" "I saw the ad and came." She wanted to blurt out, but something told her she shouldn't answer that way. "I dreamed of becoming a doctor since childhood, but it didn't work out," the young woman replied and was embarrassed. "Well, it's like that. I probably don't fit you. I'll go. I'm talking nonsense here." "Well, why nonsense?" objected her manager. "Go on. I'm very interested. So why didn't it work out?" And then Cindy, completely out of the blue, told a complete stranger her life story. She told him everything without holding anything back. That's what happens, Max said thoughtfully. At first it's all darkness, and then there it is, the light at the end of the tunnel, when you don't expect it. It's not an easy story, but I guess it was meant to be. Yeah, I guess so. You know, Cindy, you have a chance to realize your dream here. The man smiled slyly. You do? I do. We're just starting a program at the center where you can go to medical school. You will receive a stipend of 2 minimum wages. Interesting. Cindy felt dizzy and out of breath. She could feel it in her bones. This was it. Very much, sighed Cindy. So how about we fill out an application for training? But of course, if you're interested in the receptionist position, then. As if in a dream, she filled out the form and handed it to the HR manager. Uh-huh. Max nodded, running his eyes over her. If you're approved, we'll call you within the next 2 days. But do I have a chance? Cindy asked breathlessly. There's always a chance, laughed the office owner. But with a name like that, I'd certainly hope for the best. Well, let's hope for the best, she smiled. Goodbye. Goodbye. What followed was more like a fairy tale. The next day, Cindy got a call from the HR manager. Cindy, I have great news for you. He announced triumphantly. You've been accepted into medical school. Congratulations. I don't believe it, whispered the shocked woman and pinched her ear. God, am I really awake? You're not kidding me, are you? No, pranking is not our job, Max said cheerfully. From the 1st of August, the preparatory courses will begin. By that time, you need to provide the following documents. Write it down. After talking to the HR manager, Cindy fell onto the bed and laughed out loud. She suddenly felt like sharing the news. A dog barked in the yard. Here comes the Sonny, she rejoiced. Mom, how about some food? Billy asked. I'm going to heat up the pilaf now, his mother announced solemnly. And while it's warming up, I've got something to tell you. It's good, I hope. Very. So you and I are both students now. Billy laughed as he ate the pilaf. Well, it turns out we are, Cindy said. I did the math. And it turns out that when you graduate, I'll be a senior. That's funny, my son cheered. Her friends all said it was something to celebrate. I'm all for it, she assured him. I look forward to seeing you all at my place. We'll celebrate the beginning of my new life. Cindy couldn't remember a time when she'd been in such high spirits. She had enough energy for 10 people. Cindy was enjoying her studies unparalleled, and at the end of the first session, she was awarded an increased scholarship. It was like a second win for this woman who had suffered. Life was moving on, and now Cindy could say with certainty that she was doing well. Cindy had a wonderful son, loving and understanding parents, and loyal friends ready to help at any time of the day or night. And she also had a new meaning in life, which seemed to have been irrevocably lost. It was definitely worth living for. 10 years later. We're breaking up, Cindy said flatly. And don't look at me like that. It's not gonna work out. The pumped-up handsome man, clearly not used to rejection, looked at her perplexed, and it seemed even resentful, and muttered, Am I ugly? Cindy grinned. So much for generational misunderstanding, and all of Selena's advice to have an affair with a much younger man. Come on, she jabbed herself. What's Selena got to do with it? You've got your own head on your shoulders. And that head finally realized that this kind of relationship was not for Cindy. No, Steve, you're very handsome, she hastened to reassure her beau. But I think you're too good for me, and I'm embarrassed by that. Kara smiled smugly, and Cindy read her former favorite's mind. Okay then, it was written on his smarmy face. Well, why would she, a smart woman and an excellent doctor, want this narcissist? That's just it, she didn't. It was going to be a busy day. She had a meeting with her friends in an hour. Every Saturday, the charming quartet of women gathered at her favorite cafe. The ladies drank wine and discussed the events of the past week or the issues on the agenda. Cindy went outside, hailed a cab, and sat down on a bench and thought, well, why am I so unlucky in love? She thought sadly, or maybe there isn't any. When Cindy graduated with a red diploma, she had no trouble finding a job. The medical center needed a therapist, and she was invited to work there. Later, she learned that Max, the same HR manager with whom they'd had a heart-to-heart talk, had insisted she apply. Cindy was flattered, but it was a flower. Max had his eye on her back then, but at the time, the hard manager was married. It couldn't even be called a marriage, the man confided. We lived by inertia. She nodded. She had lived by inertia, but she had also lived like that, by inertia. So she had found a soulmate. That's what it turned out to be. That's why the affair was short-lived. Cindy couldn't live without love. You can't build a relationship on soulmates. She remembered Barry. She'd been burned, but she loved him. For that alone, Cindy was grateful to her late husband in his memory. Max and Cindy had parted as friends. They continued to work together, and then Max was invited to work for some cool advertising agency. Then there was Victor, a neighbor in the private sector, also a widower. And then there was Steve, handsome, athletic, charming, and nothing. Anyway, she's had enough. I have a job I love, loyal girlfriends, a great son, Cindy thought. That's more than enough to enjoy life. When Cindy entered the cafe, all her friends were already there. You're late today, Sarah said. The young lover must have held you up, Selena suggested with an innocent smile. He did, Cindy countered. It took forever for him to realize I was giving him my resignation. What? You blew Steve off? Ariana's head snapped up. Is he the center of the world? She grinned. Actually, Steve is the same age as my son, and I'm embarrassed by that. And you told him that? I did, Cindy nodded. I explained my embarrassment by saying that Kira was supposedly too good for me. Before she could finish, her friends burst out laughing. Yeah, Sarah laughed. You're very self-critical. Cindy finished her glass of wine and said, Okay, girls, it's nice to be with you, but I got to go. What's wrong? Selena asked. Don't tell me you're in a hurry to go on a date with the man of your dreams for whom you gave Steve your resignation. Oh, guys. Cindy rolled her eyes theatrically. Are you guys thinking about something else for a change? We're worried about you, aren't we? The friend said. Thank you very much, she bowed jokingly and then added seriously. But today I finally realized that these affairs are not for me, and neither is love. Well, now I'm leaving you. Tomorrow I have a meeting with the most beloved man in the world, so I have a lot of preparations to make. Lingerie candles, Sarah winked understandingly. Yeah, Cindy grinned. I'll have to bake his favorite liver pies. Billy's coming, Selena guessed, remembering his love of baked liver pies. And not alone, she smiled. Billy's coming with a girl. Good for you, Godson, Ariana said approvingly. Well, if it's with a girl, sure. What kind of girl? I don't know yet. I take it she's from the Institute. Billy was in his 5th year at the Mechanical Engineering Department of the Regional Polytechnic Institute. He was going for a red diploma, which was to be defended in a month. Billy studied a lot, but it did not interfere with the personal life of the charming blue-eyed brunette. Cindy was proud to say that Billy was like her. Mother and son were similar not only in appearance, but also in character. The most important and obvious similarity was the eagerness to study, the desire to learn new things and as a result, to develop. But the loving mother had one more parallel to draw. This parallel was personal life. About the personal life of Billy, a student of mechanical engineering faculty, there were the most incredible rumors. The tall and handsome brunette liked not only female students, but also graduate students and young female teachers. At the same time, no one had ever seen Billy with a girl, and this gave rise to a lot of rumors. Some said that Wesley was an Alfonso. They said that Billy had been seen with a beautiful, well-dressed woman who was about 20 years older than him. When Billy showed one of his classmates a photo of him with his mother, the legend was all that was left. The beautiful, well-dressed woman was Cindy. But the people did not rest on this, and after a while rumors of his unconventional orientation. Soon everyone was convinced that this is not true. The future promising engineer's girlfriend turned out to be Juliana, the institute's barmaid. And what did he find in her? Whispered students, hurt by the fact that the blue-eyed handsome man ignored them in favor of some barmaid. Only Sarah, Billy's classmate, had thought to put the question differently. Maybe she had found it, not him? The shrewd girl was not far from the truth. Julian had a pretty doll face, a seductive shape, and a desire to marry. A rich one, if only. The girl was sure that her virtues were enough for that. But the barmaid, who did not suffer from excessive intelligence, did not think that life is much more complicated than she thought. Once Juliana worked as a waitress in a cafe, and there she drew the attention of a respectable gentleman, which people called daddies. In anticipation of a beautiful life, the girl quit the cafe. And 3 months later, Mickey, as the name of the sponsor, found another shallow hunter for easy money. Left without a job and a rich daddy, Julian became despondent. But then it hit her. We should go out hunting, she thought cheerfully. Julian now realized that the age-old daddy was a temporary option anyway. No, yet one should look for an object for a permanent relationship, and in the long run for a strong and happy marriage. Therefore, the best place for hunting was a cafe where the golden youth hung out. The girl had some money left, enough to sit in an elite institution with taste. And if she was lucky, she wouldn't have to spend it. Juliana went to the hairdresser, chose the best dress bought by her daddy, and went in search of prey. 15 minutes later, she was approached by a handsome, expensively dressed major, whose name was Harry. The young people got to talking. Julian was ashamed to admit that she had nothing to do with the golden youth and had quit their cafe not long ago. And the reason for the dismissal? Not thinking long, the girl said that her father is the general director of the company and her mother is the manager. I see, family business. What kind of company? Harry asked with interest. Ah, well, so it's not here. But Julian found herself. The girl was not modest about her education either. She told her new acquaintance that she studied at the university at the Faculty of Economics. Respectfully stretched out the guy. An economist then. Yes, Julian smiled disarmingly and thought that in a way she was. The young men began dating. Harry turned out not to be some kind of major slacker, but an aspiring entrepreneur. He had a small company producing plastic windows. Harry gave the girl flowers and boxes of expensive chocolates. And one day the guy told Julian that he wanted to meet her parents. The girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry. For once, Juliana met a wealthy young man, and she could not even introduce Harry to her family, all because of her lies. Julian's parents had nothing to do with business. Her father was a construction worker and her mother was a supermarket clerk. And my parents are away right now, Julian replied. That's too bad, the boy replied. For how long? A month and a half to 2 months. You know what? Then I'll introduce you to my parents. Really? Julian was embarrassed. Well, why not? The meeting with Harry's parents took place on Saturday, and it was unforgettable. On the occasion of such an important event, Julian wore a little black dress, which was also donated by a former sponsor. I remember that at the time she was surprised that such a simple-looking dress cost a lot of money. Remember, it's called noble simplicity, Mickey said instructively, and it costs a lot of money, a lot more than brightness and glitter. Julian thought this dress would be a great way to meet the parents of a young rich man. She chose boat shoes and a clutch, unencumbered with decorations, and did her makeup in nude colors. Julian was sure that the noble simplicity would be appreciated. Come in, don't be shy, Harry said cordially. He took the girl by the hand and led her into the hall, where the guy's parents and a fancy table were waiting for them. Mom, Dad, said the boy solemnly. Meet Julianne. This is Julianne, my girlfriend. Seeing Harry's father, Juliana automatically backed away. In front of her was Mickey, her ex-daddy. He was staring at Julianne, and she thought he was going to say something mean. But nothing of the sort happened. Harry's father, as if nothing had happened, greeted the girl, introduced himself, and then introduced his wife. Lucy was a beautiful, slender, and sophisticated woman. What did these daddies lack? Thought Julian involuntarily at the sight of the mature beauty. Oh yes, and she thought that such embarrassments happen only in the movies. Julian, what do you do? Lucy asked with a smile. The girl's tongue stuck to the sky, and it was incredibly difficult to lie in the presence of a person who knew the whole truth about her. And Julian is an economics student, Harry answered for her. Really? Smirked Mickey. It was unlikely that his wife and son noticed the smirk. And if they did, so what? They didn't realize anything anyway. I wonder if they realized the antics of the father of the family. Giggled Julianne to herself. Good girl, praised Lucy. Who are your parents, if it's no secret? The girl remained silent, and Harry, writing it off to her excitement, came to the rescue again. Julian's parents have a firm in St. Petersburg. Even so, the head of the family nodded ironically. More than anything else in the world, the girl wanted to run away from this house. She scolded herself. Now I have to think of a way to get out of here. It's a shame, of course, but Mickey won't let us be together. And what to do with businessmen parents? Hearing the smartphone trinkle, notifying the owner of a messenger message, Julian apologized. Probably the parents, she said. Nothing, Lucy nodded understandingly. The message was sent from a familiar, though already deleted, number. If you don't want to get in trouble, get out of here and quick. I don't want you here, read Julianne. The abundance of exclamation marks clearly indicated that her visit had excited Mickey beyond belief. Okay, whatever you say, Julianne thought with a chuckle. I didn't really feel like it. You'll have to excuse me, but I have to run, Julianne said with regret in her voice. So soon? Lucy was surprised, and there was a note of regret in her voice. Julianne was terribly embarrassed, but as they say, out of sight, out of mind. It was better this way, and the fact that she'd lied to Harry out of her ass didn't matter, or rather, it had been relegated to the background. But her former relationship with Mickey is no joke. Sooner or later, all secret things come to light. The girl left the hospitable apartment forever, and since then she and Harry never saw each other again. He, of course, called and wrote, but Julianne, not without regret, put the guy in the CS. When she told this story to her friend Vala, she laughed until she fell. Yes, laughed the girl, relationships were doomed from the beginning, by virtue of aggravating circumstances. Stop laughing, Julianne shouted. By the way, guys like that don't just walk down the street. That's true, Valia nodded seriously. But on the other hand, he's not the only one. And men like you, so it's too early to be discouraged. But I won't go to the cafe for golden youth anymore. You don't have to, my friend exclaimed. You know, Julian, there aren't really that many good guys among them. It's just that you were lucky at the time. And most of them are mama's boys and daddy's boys. And most of them have a nasty temper. Do you want that? What are you suggesting? You want to get married? What's wrong with university students? Yes, I know, now you say that they have no money, not counting the penny scholarship. That's true, but there's a catch. What's the difference? It's obvious, they don't have anything now, but when they get their diplomas and get on their feet. Julian thought about it. It's true. Most of the guys who got their degrees had a good life. And yes, unlike the majors, they were independent. A few days later, while surfing the internet for job openings, Julian saw an ad. Cafe at Polytechnic Institute needs a barmaid. So maybe it was fate. Interesting guy, Julian said as if indifferently, looking at the dark-haired young man with the beautiful blue eyes. Interesting, nodded Catherine, one of the female students she had already made friends with. But what's the use? He's what? The barmaid did not finish, but the girl understood everything perfectly. No, she shook her head, although and such rumors were rumored. But to me, Billy just doesn't have any experience with girls. I wouldn't be surprised if he was still a virgin. All right, Julian, I'll have 2 scoops of pistachio ice cream with chocolate syrup. And a coffee. No experience, you say? Julian muttered to herself as Catherine walked away, thinking to herself, maybe he just hasn't met a real woman. The guy left the cafe, unaware that he was being watched closely. At the next break, the enterprising barmaid went on the offensive. When Julian saw through the glass doors that the blue-eyed brunette was heading for the cafeteria, she tinted her lips and undid the top 2 buttons of her blouse. Listening to you, putting a velvety quality to her voice, the barmaid said as the guy approached the serving counter. I would like a cup of coffee and a pastry basket, the customer asked politely. Julian asked, leaning against the counter so that her lush breasts were at Billy's eye level. Suddenly, she noticed that the guy was blushing. It made her laugh, but in her heart, Juliana was triumphant. She had clearly made an impression on the guy. Well, yeah, he replied embarrassedly. It's good for the brain. You're in luck. Julian smiled flirtatiously. We're having a special today. 2nd brownie for free. So your brain will be working as it should. There was a hint in the last phrase, but it was obvious that the boy didn't understand anything. Well, he doesn't have to. He'll figure it out later. Well, in the meantime, a promotion. Billy was surprised. I'd never heard of any promotions here. We have a new boss now. Julian lied with inspiration, and they've decided to have a promotion. The 100th customer would get a second product for free. It was on the eve of the 8th of March. On this occasion, the Institute organized a huge party. The party was attended not only by students, teachers, and administration, but also by junior staff, checkroom attendants, cleaners, canteen attendants, and everyone else. When the white dance was announced, Julian didn't hesitate to invite Billy. The barmaid clung to him in a way that made him uncomfortable, and half an hour later, the student was already opening the dorm room door. "Please," Billy said with a smile. The news of the affair between the student and the barmaid spread through the institute with the speed of a spring forest fire. The boys' friends went into a stupor. Billy's birthday was celebrated in the dormitory. The girls were preparing a festive dinner, and Julian was busily commanding the parade. The barmaid didn't mind the meaningful glances the girls gave her. Julian's look said envy and silence, and they were, needless to say, jealous. The boys had their own point of view. "What are you doing, Pacan?" Evan asked perplexedly when the guys went out for a smoke. "It was just an option for a couple of nights." Billy shrugged philosophically. "Whatever," Stephen grinned. "You can tell a bird by its flight." "Guys, no offense," Weasley said firmly, "but my personal life is my business, and Julian is my choice. She's my girlfriend, and I want you to treat her with respect." "No problem," the friends said in unison, raising their hands as if in surrender. "Are you sure?" Billy asked, confused. "Actually, I took 2 tests and went to the doctor," Julian said resentfully. "Or don't you believe me?" "No, I don't." Billy hastened to reassure her. "Well, if that's the case, let's go to my place. I'll introduce you to my mom." "If that's the case?" the girl exclaimed. "You mean if I wasn't pregnant, you wouldn't introduce me to your mom?" "Julian, don't twist things around," the guy grumbled. Frankly, Julian's pregnancy was a no-brainer right now. He was about to defend his diploma. Billy didn't get enough sleep, and his beloved was throwing tantrums on the spot. However, he realized that the child was not to blame. Billy was far from denying paternity. He would marry Julian, as an honest man should. Billy suddenly thought of his mother. When he was a boy, he had heard Grandma Betty and his father say more than once that his mother had tied the baby down and should be grateful to them for covering up the sin. He didn't understand anything at the time, but as he got older, he realized it wasn't that simple. One day, 8-year-old Billy overheard a conversation between Grandma Angelica and an old friend, and she said that it was Grandma Betty who insisted on marriage. And when Billy was 10 or 11 years old, he wondered what his mother had to thank his father and Grandma Betty for. As it turned out, there was nothing to be thankful for. His father had been a constant libertine, and Grandma Betty had been self-effacing. As Grandma Angelica said, she's got her idol and is enjoying married life with her young husband. "Why am I bringing all this up?" thought Billy perplexedly, and then he realized he and his mother had similar fates. Gender adjusted, of course, except that Julian doesn't fight, but that's pretty much it. And another thing, she and her mother are goal-oriented people. Perhaps their life principle can be summarized in the words of a famous saying, "Live and learn forever." Mother received a medical degree when she was already 38, and this is not everyone decides, while they're halves. "Well, aren't you an idiot?" Billy chided himself. "I love Julian, and I don't care whether she's a barmaid or a member of the State Duma." The young men got out of the minibus and walked toward the Gurianot's house. It was a pretty house, Juliana noted. The house really did look the part. The plastic windows, put in when her father was still alive, looked as good as new. The house was finished with gray and white siding and a silver metal roof. The improvised landscaping using car tires and kefir bottles also looked very nice, especially now when peonies, violets, and irises were blooming in the beds of tires, exuding a marvelous smell. "Glad you like it," Billy smiled. A beautiful, slender brunette with the same blue eyes as his came out onto the porch. "You didn't tell me you had a sister," Julian said. "So I don't have a sister," laughed Billy. "Meet my mom, Cindy." "Come on, Cindy," the woman grinned. I'm not that old yet. Just call me Cindy. How young she is, Julianne thought enviously. Or maybe she just had an early birth. Julianne, what do you do? Cindy asked, and she grinned. She was immediately reminded of another acquaintance. I'm a barmaid, she answered, looking at her potential mother-in-law defiantly. A barmaid? But Billy told me you were from college. I am from the Institute. I work there as a barmaid. What's wrong? Not good enough. Julian, I don't think I've done anything to offend you, Cindy said. And no, I have nothing against barmaids. I married a handyman as a student, so. Mom, don't mind me, my son intervened. Julian's just nervous. It's normal in her condition. Hormones, you know. Oh my God, Cindy burst out. Guys, you have to warn me. What difference would it have made? The girl squinted. Julian, why are you being so hard on yourself? Of course, it wouldn't have changed anything. But this isn't about buying a dog, is it? And by the way, I'm a doctor, and I know a lot of specialists. Good specialists. No thanks, she shook her head. We in the regional center with this problem is not. Well, as you know. She doesn't sound sincere, Cindy told her friends. Oh, I can feel it in my heart that this isn't gonna end well. Can't Billy see past his own nose? Cindy, Ariana said mockingly. Doesn't this remind you of anything? Imagine it does, she exclaimed. Is that a reason to let your son get involved with who knows who? I'm pretty sure that that woman's got Billy wrapped around her finger. I don't mean that in a reproachful way. It's just that you know that when you're in love, you think, this is the only person I'll ever be happy with. Isn't that right? Yes, Cindy nodded sadly. So what do we do now? What? Selena hummed cheerfully. You need a man. Who's talking about what? And she's right. Ariana and Sarah said it together. Oh, come on. A week later, Cindy met her daughter-in-law's parents. They turned out to be nice people, and the future mother-in-law thought, maybe I'm getting myself worked up for nothing. Perhaps Julian really nervous, as any girl when meeting the groom's family. And then there are the hormones. The wedding was decided to play in the banquet hall of a cafe, the owner of which was a friend of the bride's mother. Will make us a good discount, winked Anna. The wedding was fun, but Cindy suddenly felt like she was losing her son. What's the big deal? Ariana asked, perplexed. Yes, the boy has his own family now, but you're not going to stop being his mother. Come on, friend, smile. She was wearing a national costume in which Ariana was handing out pancakes as godmother. Her friend had beet blush on her cheeks, and looking at her, it was impossible not to smile. There, that's better, exclaimed the charming peddler of pancakes, but on the soul of the mother of the groom scratched Cass. There were only a few days left before the diploma defense, and Billy was scrambling, and his young wife was demanding attention, and she was cranky. Billy, she called out. What? The husband asked absent-mindedly. I want strawberries. Billy almost howled, but held back. 15 minutes ago, he had returned from the store where he had gone at the request of his wife, who wanted bananas. Billy had brought a bunch, but Julian had barely taken a bite of one banana and now demanded strawberries. Julian, I don't have time for this, Billy replied patiently. Would you wait half an hour? No, I won't, she said in a tone that didn't tolerate objections. Then go yourself, suggested her husband. They say it's good for pregnant women to walk. I don't feel well. Well, all right, Billy sighed and got up from the table. Every day, God knows he tried to be understanding, but every day it was getting harder and harder. Be patient, his mother said. She'd give birth and be the same. The young father-to-be only sighed heavily. When will that be? Billy, I don't think your mom likes me, Julianne once told me. Why would you say that? Actually, she wasn't far from the truth. Billy knew it was true, although Cindy had the wisdom to hide it. Well, I'm not blind. She also doesn't believe it's your baby. Did she tell you that herself? Her husband asked, busy preparing his defense as usual. Well, not directly, of course. Julianne stretched out. But the last time she came to visit us, what was it? Oh, nothing, she said casually. Anyway, Billy, it would be better if your mother didn't come here anymore. All right, I'll tell her that, Billy sighed. Just don't tell her I told you about it. Okay, Julianne kept up. Okay, I won't. But how am I going to explain it to her? How do you want to explain it to her? She replied nonchalantly. Well, tell her there's no place to sleep. Well, I understand, Billy nodded. What's there to yell about? You want positive emotions, but you're yelling like a victim. Calm down, I heard you. Honestly, the wife smiled. Julian's mood was changing like the weather. Honestly, he said, kissing his wife on the temple. Billy never dared to tell his mother what his wife had asked. Sometimes he felt like he was caught in the middle of some terrible element. That's basically what it is, Billy thought. I'm between two fires, and fire is an element. He had no idea what to do in such a delicate and unpleasant situation. After all, Billy loved them both and wanted everyone to live together, but it seemed he wanted too much. Cindy didn't recognize her son, and that was the issue on another Saturday agenda. Well, I don't know, shrugged Sarah. It seems to me like you're making a storm in a glass of water. No, I'm not, Cindy said thoughtfully. As soon as I offer to come over and bring groceries, Billy says he doesn't have to and promises to come himself. So what? Snorted Ariane. The newlyweds want to be alone. Julian's pregnant, so there's no time for guests. Besides, the son promised to come himself. He's not coming, she said. Well, honey, the kid's got a defense coming up, no time to travel, and he promised. Well, I don't know, so you don't take offense. Yeah, I guess, Cindy mumbled. I'm a bit of a mess. So why would you go to the sanitarium? Selena asked cautiously. Get some rest, get better. I'm not going to a sanitarium. She waved her hand. Lately, Cindy had been having some serious heart problems. Her colleagues urged her to go to a sanatorium, but Cindy didn't want to hear about it. Not yet, she told cardiologist Veretinikov with a sigh. Medic, and so careless about your health, strictly reprimanded her colleague. Stephen, I solemnly swear to you, as soon as I deal with all my affairs, I will take care of my health, said Cindy with a smile. So why should I swear? A little better, grinned Veretinikov. It's your health, and it doesn't ask about your affairs. The doctor was right, of course, but Cindy knew that until she could figure things out for herself, she wouldn't be able to rest easy. Well, you shouldn't, said Sarah. You're tearing up your soul, not to mention your heart. But Cindy shook her head stubbornly. Waking up at dawn, Cindy remembered that her son had a defense today and decided to call. Billy answered right away. Hi, honey, she said with a tenderness that made her son's heart ache. Hi, May. How are you feeling? Fighting, I hope. You bet. Well, good for you. Break a leg. Go to hell, Billy said cheerfully, and mother and son laughed merrily. Almost like before, Cindy thought sadly, but almost. The defense of the diploma went brilliantly. The classmates celebrated the event in a cafe, and a grand banquet was planned for the evening in the dormitory. Are you coming? Stephen asked. No, guys, I'll pass. Billy said no. I'd love to, but, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, Stephen nodded. Home family. Hello to your wife. Back home, Billy was in for another round of hysterics. I'm sitting here alone and you're having fun. Julian said it unhappily, not even asking how the defense had gone. But Julianne. Billy didn't know what to say. Okay, forget it, she said. And then suddenly, with a painful wince, she clutched her stomach. What's the matter? Billy asked fearfully. No, it's nothing, it's fine, Julian whispered, but it sounded unconvincing. What about it, though? The doctor said it's a miscarriage. What? Julian, this is not a joke. Should we call an ambulance? No, don't do that. The doctor says it happens from time to time. So now we have to call an ambulance every time. I don't know, Billy shrugged. I think it's better to be safe. Billy, I know what's best for me, Julian said softly. Well, okay, if that's the case. After his diploma, Billy wondered if he could find a job. He surfed the internet, went on interviews, but so far, alas, to no avail. Julian grumbled that her husband wasn't spending enough time with her, to which Billy remarked, Julian, I apologize profusely, but what are we going to live on? On your barmaid's salary. What's wrong with my job? Julian stood up. Yes, I have no higher education, and I work as a simple barmaid, but you knew who you were marrying. What's that got to do with it? He was surprised. But you have nothing to do with everything. shouted the wife so loudly that even choked. And your mother also nothing to do. She's definitely got nothing to do with it now, Billy said, trying to be calm. That's it, honey. I'm out of here. Where to? Julianne was stunned, obviously hoping to continue the verbal altercation. Billy even began to suspect that she was enjoying these skirmishes. To the interview, he cut off and left the apartment. Missed again, Billy thought dejectedly. Another failed job interview. It was all about the same lack of work experience, except where to get it. He made his way to the public garden and looked over at the pub. His mother had given him some money in honor of his diploma, so Billy could afford to drink with grief. And not only that, he was already finishing a mug of cold and wildly tasty beer when Julianne called. Well, I understand, Billy nodded. What's there to yell about? You want positive emotions, but you're yelling like a victim. Calm down, I heard you. Honestly, the wife smiled. Julian's mood was changing like the weather. Honestly, he said, kissing his wife on the temple. Billy never dared to tell his mother what his wife had asked. Sometimes he felt like he was caught in the middle of some terrible element. That's basically what it is, Billy thought. I'm between two fires, and fire is an element. He had no idea what to do in such a delicate and unpleasant situation. After all, Billy loved them both and wanted everyone to live together, but it seemed he wanted too much. Cindy didn't recognize her son, and that was the issue on another Saturday agenda. Well, I don't know, shrugged Sarah. It seems to me like you're making a storm in a glass of water. No, I'm not, Cindy said thoughtfully. As soon as I offer to come over and bring groceries, Billy says he doesn't have to and promises to come himself. So what? Snorted Ariane. The newlyweds want to be alone. Julian's pregnant, so there's no time for guests. Besides, the son promised to come himself. He's not coming, she said. Well, honey, the kid's got a defense coming up. No time to travel. And he promised. Well, I don't know, so you don't take offense. Yeah, I guess, Cindy mumbled. I'm a bit of a mess. So why would you go to the sanitarium? Selena asked cautiously. Get some rest, get better. I'm not going to a sanitarium. She waved her hand. Lately, Cindy had been having some serious heart problems. Her colleagues urged her to go to a sanatorium, but Cindy didn't want to hear about it. Not yet, she told cardiologist Veretinikov with a sigh. Medic, and so careless about your health, strictly reprimanded her colleague. Stephen, I solemnly swear to you, as soon as I deal with all my affairs, I will take care of my health, said Cindy with a smile. So why should I swear? A little better, grinned Veretinikov. It's your health, and it doesn't ask about your affairs. The doctor was right, of course, but Cindy knew that until she could figure things out for herself, she wouldn't be able to rest easy. Well, you shouldn't, said Sarah. You're tearing up your soul, not to mention your heart. But Cindy shook her head stubbornly. Waking up at dawn, Cindy remembered that her son had a defense today and decided to call. Billy answered right away. Hi, honey, she said with a tenderness that made her son's heart ache. Hi, May. How are you feeling? Fighting, I hope. You bet. Well, good for you. Break a leg. Go to hell, Billy said cheerfully, and mother and son laughed merrily. Almost like before, Cindy thought sadly, but almost. The defense of the diploma went brilliantly. The classmates celebrated the event in a cafe, and a grand banquet was planned for the evening in the dormitory. Are you coming? Stephen asked. No, guys, I'll pass. Billy said no. I'd love to, but, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, Stephen nodded. Home family. Hello to your wife. Back home, Billy was in for another round of hysterics. I'm sitting here alone and you're having fun. Julian said it unhappily, not even asking how the defense had gone. But Julianne. Billy didn't know what to say. Okay, forget it, she said. And then suddenly, with a painful wince, she clutched her stomach. What's the matter? Billy asked fearfully. No, it's nothing, it's fine, Julian whispered, but it sounded unconvincing. What about it, though? The doctor said it's a miscarriage. What? Julian, this is not a joke. Should we call an ambulance? No, don't do that. The doctor says it happens from time to time. So now we have to call an ambulance every time. I don't know, Billy shrugged. I think it's better to be safe. Billy, I know what's best for me, Julian said softly. Well, okay, if that's the case. After his diploma, Billy wondered if he could find a job. He surfed the internet, went on interviews, but so far, alas, to no avail. Julian grumbled that her husband wasn't spending enough time with her, to which Billy remarked, "Julian, I apologize profusely, but what are we going to live on? On your barmaid's salary? What's wrong with my job?" Julian stood up. "Yes, I have no higher education, and I work as a simple barmaid, but you knew who you were marrying. What's that got to do with it?" He was surprised. "But you have nothing to do with everything," shouted the wife so loudly that even choked. "And your mother also nothing to do." "She's definitely got nothing to do with it now," Billy said, trying to be calm. "That's it, honey. I'm out of here." Billy was already in the driveway when he got the call. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello, are you Billy Wesley?" the caller asked. "Well, let's say I am," he answered. "This is Anthony, a cardiologist from the 4th City Hospital. The thing is, your mother." Billy went cold. "What's wrong with my mom?" Listening to the doctor, the boy went cold, and he hadn't realized his mother had a heart problem. "What did you even know, asshole?" reprimanded Billy to himself. Unable to contain his emotions any longer, he sobbed like a child. When Billy entered the apartment, Julian was chirping merrily on the phone, looking out the window. Normally, he would have made himself known right away, lest, God forbid, he be suspected of eavesdropping. But this time it was as if something had made Billy stop and listen to what his wife was saying. "Lucy, it's all right," she said cheerfully to her friend. "Now I'm bringing him to the fact that I'm in danger of miscarriage, and of course, showy tantrums. By the way, the idea of dinner was brilliant. Thank you." "How?" "It's very simple. Billy will come home in a week, and I'll be lying in bed, all sick. He's gonna ask me what's wrong, and I'm gonna tell him I had a miscarriage. But this sucker won't understand anything anyway. Well, of course not. I neutralized my mother." Julian suddenly turned around sharply and seeing her husband said, "I'll call you back." "Bravo." Billy nodded and slowly, with formation, struck his hands 3 times. "And why, I wondered, were you a barmaid?" "Billy, you've got it all wrong." Julian justified herself pathetically. "Oh, don't give me that." He waved his hand. "Well, you weren't lying about my mother. She's in the hospital right now. You really neutralized her to perfection." "In the hospital?" Julian whispered. "I'm sorry." "Oh, really?" grinned Billy. Billy gathered his things and said at the door, "Well, darling, see you later. I'm filing for divorce this week, and good luck finding a new idiot." Cindy looked much better. She had an appetite and a healthy blush on her cheeks. Anthony entered the room with a pretty little basket of flowers and a bag of fruit. "Well, beautiful." He waved his hands cheerfully. "But I think you'll look even more beautiful now. If, of course, it is possible." "And what will happen?" the patient asked with a smile. "Now you will see." Anthony answered and turned to someone standing in the corridor. "Please, may I?" shyly asked painfully familiar and so dear voice. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was such an idiot." "Billy," Cindy exclaimed and cried. "Come here, I'm gonna kick your ears off." "Kick your ears off," my son humbly replied. "I've earned it." "Son, meet Anthony," she said. "A very good man, and well, he is." "Mom, I understand everything," the son replied with a smile, looking meaningfully at the basket of flowers. "And something tells me that it is he who will help you forget all your troubles." "Mom, you know what I remember?" "What do you remember?" "Cindy, Anthony, and Billy coming out of the registry office. I remembered how you graduated from the institute, and I just started studying," answered my son. So you're getting married and I'm getting divorced," Billy sighed. Cindy hugged her son and said, "You'll be happy yet." They got into the car and drove to the restaurant, where the closest parents of the newlyweds, Betty, some of Anthony's friends, and of course Ariana, Selena, and Sarah were waiting for them. Anthony held Cindy's hand, and she smiled serenely and thought, and I, silly me, was afraid of change.